Hello, welcome to the Fanfic Majesty. If you want more content, you can follow me on Patreon. I will be uploading more content on there that will be exclusive. The link is in the description. Please support me.
2SS% Chapter 26 Lose 1 Baidu. 1 of the Extreme Ice. 1 Knife. Recommendation Ticket. Collection. Previous chapter. Next chapter advertisement. The first thing to change is the position of the face. Just like the transformation of Shen Gungbao in the Neza movie that I watched through. And then the shoulders, chest, arms. And finally to the whole body. The body can't be compared with the shape just now. The skyrocketing muscles. The aura is different. And a red light flashes in his eyes inadvertently. Qu D subconsciously exhaled a beast-like breath from his nostrils, then moved his shoulders casually, making a crackling noise. Then she looked at the little bit because the sleeve Shirayuki was still stuck on the arm muscles and was holding on tightly. At this moment, the difference in body shape between Hayden and Qu D is even more severe. The height of Hayden who is lifted seems to be not half of Qu D's current height. Brother. I'm just kidding, you really have something. Hayden, who was stunned, looked down at Qu D, who had turned into a beast at the moment. His fluffy body was covered with yellow-black rose-like markings. Hayden saw the strangeness of this world again. After the transformation, Qu D didn't do anything further. Immediately after him, he stared at Hayden with that cat's eyes and calmly said, I really advise you to give up now, otherwise I don't know what will happen next. The expressionless face seemed even more stern. Persuasive. Well, I will also. Puff. Hayden was thrown away by Qu D before he could finish his words. Fortunately, he always held the sleeve Shirayuki tightly in his hand, and it would be embarrassing if the knife got stuck on Qu D. Without a vigorous flick, Hayden flipped his body and easily controlled the fall to the ground. There is a distance of about tens of meters between the two now. Damn. You come and I come too. Hayden was a little angry when he was interrupted. Let you see my Zhanpakudao knife named Sleeve Baishui. Then Hayden wiped off the blood that oozes from the corner of his mouth, and his right hand holding the handle of the knife rotated along with it, and the chain at the end followed it to draw an arc in the air. Ling Wu. Shu Baishui. All the spiritual pressure hidden in the body burst out at this moment, and the doubling of spiritual power seemed to materialize. Around Hayden at this time, white ice crystals formed prismatic ice cones around him. The chain turned into a pure white ribbon, and the whiteness of the blade, handle, and collar once again rose by a level, and the chill that emanated was even more shocking. Advertisement Qu D felt Hayden not far away, and he didn't feel like he had been severely injured just now. The knife also gave him an ominous feeling. At the same time, the crowd watching the battle from afar, the people in this training camp who were not as strong as Hayden and Qu D, only felt that at this moment, it was as if someone was pinching their heart with their hands, unable to breathe. At this moment, Hayden gave them something like he had encountered a natural enemy, instinctively wanting to escape and instinctively wanting to surrender. Even the instructor, who has been on the Great Route for many years, has the strength of a lieutenant general in his headquarters, and he feels the threat that Hayden exudes at this moment. Does this kid look like a king? Hayden's eyes were fixed on Q's, and Qu could naturally notice the look in his eyes. Now is the real beginning. This was the same thought in their minds. After the next blink, Hayden suddenly started. The skyrocketing spiritual pressure represents the improvement in all aspects of physical fitness, the speed of movement, the speed of freezing, the strength of swinging the knife, and the power of slashing. Immediately afterwards, Qu D seemed to have made an appointment, and in the second when Hayden's feet were off the ground, he also suddenly ejected towards Hayden. The fruit of the animal system also enhances all aspects of physical fitness. Depending on the type of fruit of the animal system, people with abilities have different special talents. The jaguar is different from the shape of the leopard. It is also called the jaguar. The pattern on the body is more like a leopard, but the shape of the whole body is closer to that of a tiger, and the muscles are developed. This also means that the 6 formulas that did not meet the conditions of use in the normal state before can be used after transformation. In short, the two people are moving at almost the same speed at this time. At this time, it was as if Mars hit the Earth, and the first impact was coming. Bang! The impact produced a thick dust of human height. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. The blade touched the flesh, and the two then jumped back and out of the smoke. then rushed into the smoke again without stopping. The momentum generated by the impact of boom broke through the smoke, revealing a figure. Then, the two of you move me. Hayden hit Qu D's punches on his body, and was swept a few legs, and the position of the hit was a bit painful. But he slashed Qu D's body, but he was like slashing steel, unable to cut down, and stuck on his skin. Qu D blocked every slash of Hayden with 6 types of iron blocks. The two figures were on the field, and in the sky, there was a transparent shockwave that sparked from the impact. Then there was a stalemate for several rounds. Hayden's physical strength is not as good as that of Qu D. Seeing that his physical strength is about to run out, he can no longer fight Qu D like this. Advertisement. Immediately Hayden used the binding road to trap Qu D. However, at this time, Bound Dao could only freeze and hold Qu D for less than a second before he broke free. But it doesn't matter. Hayden's sword moves have been aimed at him and slashed out. The land of extreme ice blizzard. In the next second, Hayden's sleeve baishui had already swung countless slashes, and the shadow of the sword was like a wind and snow slamming on him in a cold winter night, slashing at Qu D's body without a dead end. The additional cold current was silent and inadvertently immersed into Qu D's body, banging, slashing and splashing ice on Qu D's body. Qu D only had time to put his hands in front of him, used the iron block, and then prayed that he would not be killed by this trick. Even with a steel-like appearance, with every slash that instantly freezes a part of his body, the internal injuries he suffered will gradually become unstoppable. At this time, the audience was shocked, watching the momentary changes in the field. The situation reversed in the blink of an eye. Although Qu D used the animal fruit abilities that they didn't know, Hayden was still pressing Qu D. However, at this time, Hayden's physical exertion gradually reduced the speed of his sword swing. Unfortunately, Qu D seized this opportunity. The power provided by the animal devil fruit is just like an endless perpetual motion machine. He gritted his teeth, letting his spare power go, his hands stretched out with one of them forcefully, and he bounced off Hayden. As soon as the trick was interrupted, Hayden didn't dare to get close, and with the help of Qu D's power, he distanced himself from him. Just got a chance to breathe, and breathe in big mouthfuls of air to ease the rapid rhythm. After returning to his senses, he noticed that his Ryotsu was really about to bottom out. He immediately made a decision in his mind that he didn't like, and it was also a decision he had to make. Hayden intends to make the last move, one that he feels terrified. -100 degrees. Let your temperature drop to 100 degrees, increase the power of freezing, and strengthen the attack. At this time, he was able to control the temperature a little bit at present, and he could barely help the action under the control of Ling's body. Qu D, I also recognize your strength. Hayden looked at Qu D and didn't take any further action, then shouted out. At the same time, this is also a smoke bomb released for the next trick, in short, as long as it can affect Qu D a little. After I win, I can barely accept you as my little brother. Hayden babbled wildly, hoping to provoke Qu D. Advertisement, are you serious? Qu D thought he was going to say something. Just now he felt that his physical strength should be almost here, but now he still wants to disturb me with words? Qu D wanted to laugh a little while impatient, and then rushed over without waiting for Hayden's next move. -18 degrees. Hayden changed to the posture of holding a knife in both hands, and a white chill came out of his skin. -50 degrees. Now the exhaled air can no longer be easily touched. -1 Baidu. Hayden was dyed a layer of white now, and he didn't want to say any more, because Qu D had already rushed in front of him. One of the extreme ice, a knife. Shu Baishui slashed straight to the side of Qu D in front of him. For a moment, the knife fell. A long road of icy thorns immediately appeared, and the distance even extended to the wall of the school field. Just the wind of the knife brought up by Shu Baishui froze Qu D's whole person, and lost consciousness in a large block of ice that was almost his height. However, Hayden was uncomfortable, and he immediately solved the solution after he swung it. When using this trick, he is always cautious. This is a trick that can defeat himself with a little carelessness. This time, backlash occurred. The skin on top and bottom of his body was already dark blue, and he was able to touch the ground with the Zhanpakudao knife, just enough to support his body so as not to fall to the ground. The 0-degree fog produced by the great movement and quietness. At this time, the thick fog that was floating around gradually dissipated, and what appeared in front of the crowd was a large pile of ice with Qu D and Hayden barely standing. Hayden won. The people on the court immediately fell into a state of bewilderment. What happened just now? The instructor did not froze. Lieutenant General Qu gave him a reminder a few days ago that he knew the specifics. So immediately flashed onto the court with a shave. After checking Hayden's situation, there was nothing serious, and then he looked at Qu D. He could still feel the breath of Qu D. He hurriedly inserted the ice cube with one hand and carried him straight to the hospital. Smog, who also called the Smog, followed him, and hurriedly carried Hayden to follow him. In the same way, a large group of people in the back also followed to the hospital, all wanting to see what happened next. Chapter 27: The Aftermath of the Battle. The mouth is connected to the hidden weapon, seeking collection, seeking recommendation ticket. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. After Hayden used a tactic of injuring the enemy 1000 and losing 800, the two men in the same critical situation fell into a coma. The whole body was frozen like Hayden, who had been put in the freezer for several days, and Qu D, who had been made into a Navy cat popsicle by Hayden. Under the superb medical treatment of the two men who had lost consciousness, Hayden's body gradually returned to normal. After the special thawing of Qu D, the power of the cat's fruit dissipated, and the breath gradually calmed down. Fortunately, with the ability of Lieutenant General Qu, the natural frozen fruit ability, he provided a lot of doctors with a wealth of hands-on experience. The two of them were able to escape from this degree of injury. It was at the time when there were relatively few people in the hospital. As a result, a large number of people came suddenly, which really made them tremble, thinking that something big had happened outside. The results of the battle between Hayden and Qu D shocked everyone in the training camp. After being sent to the hospital, almost everyone in the training camp was crowded in the corridor of the hospital, wanting to know how the two of them were doing. Qu D, who they didn't know about eating devil fruit, and Hayden, who had only joined them for only half a year. The momentum generated by the fighting between the two could feel the palpitations in their hearts far away. After the end, they followed the instructor and Smog and walked up to the battlefield. There seemed to be no end to the ice road, and the cold air from above still left Hayden's aftermath. The countless small pits around the venue were bombarded by Qu D, like a scene bombed by a salvo of naval guns. These two people are no longer on the same level as them. A few days after the aftermath of the battle, there was a lifeless noon. The wind does not blow, the birds do not call, and the curtains by the window are like this. Hayden and Qu D, who are lying on the bed with their eyes closed, are silent. Looking out to the sky through the open window, the gray was puffed and the color was lost. Tina was sitting on a chair by the window, holding a red apple in her hand, and holding a knife to peel her skin stiffly. Advertisement: swipe. The ball-like apples were cut into stick apples. D-filled lower right triangle. Tina's brows were almost corrected. Although she had shaved it once a day in the past few days, she still couldn't shave it well. Angrily, she bit the apple in one bite and looked angrily. Puff. A silly voice sounded in the quiet ward, and Tina immediately turned to look at the location of the bed. Hayden, who had been in a coma for a few days, woke up without knowing when. He had already sat up on the back of the bed. "Hey, eldest sister." Hayden, who was looking at Tina, said immediately, "Why can't you even cut an apple?" Thinking of what he had just seen in his mind, he couldn't help but want to laugh. "Hi." Tina, who had been guarding for several hours a day since Hayden was in a coma, suddenly became excited and just wanted to blurt out. Her eyes were a little moist. But in my mind he remembered that he had dared to laugh at my elder sister just now. "Little brother. You dare not call me when you wake up." Hands up and down. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. As soon as he tried hard, he threw the bite of the apple directly at Hayden. Crack. The apple rushing towards the front door made Hayden subconsciously catch it with his mouth. The scene fell into embarrassment. After catching it, Hayden was shocked, and Tina, who saw Hayden actually use her mouth, was also shocked. "What are you doing?" That was Tina just. Little Tina, who had already shown the temperament of the royal sister, immediately blushed, and she stammered when she said something, her movements twisted. Advertisement. And Hayden, who was stunned, immediately recovered, and he didn't care and said with a smile, "Apple tastes good." After speaking, he took a bite and chewed in his mouth. Seeing Hayden actually swallowed the apple he had eaten, a slight mist appeared on Tina's pink head. She couldn't say anything at this time. It seems that it was caused by the noise of the two. The next hospital bed did not know how long he had been awake, and Qu D, who had been listening for how long, couldn't bear it anymore. "Oh my God. You two just change rooms, okay," Qu D said, lying on the hospital bed and watching the white ceiling. Even if he doesn't talk much, he basically acts as a listener, and he can't stand these two people at this moment. The third person's voice suddenly came out, stunned the two who were planning to make a fuss. "You're awake too." Hayden turned to Qu D's voice and noticed that he was lying on the bed with his eyes open. Hayden was a little embarrassed. After all, the current situation has woken Qu D, but I don't know if he wakes up or wakes up before me. "It won't work if you don't wake up," Qu D said quietly while looking at the ceiling without thinking of getting up. "Ha ha ha," Hayden couldn't help but smiled, touching the back of his head. Subsequently, the door of the ward was pushed open. A silver-haired Smog came in with a basket. After entering the door, he noticed the difference in the room at the moment. "You two are awake." Pausing and continuing to walk, he said to the two on the bed while walking towards Tina. "I thought it would take a few days for you to wake up. This lunch is only for Tina. I will ask someone to get 2 more copies later." Smog went to the window and put the basket on the table. "Advertisement, thank you." X2 Hayden, who wanted to know that he had been in a coma for a few days, asked immediately, and Qu D next to him also wanted to know. 3 days. Smog replied. "Then what happened after the two of us? Did I win?" The previous memory paused after he cut the move. Hayden didn't know what happened next, he wanted to know if he won. "Well, Hayden, you won in the end." Smalls looked at Hayden and nodded, although you both lost consciousness in the end. Qu D was speechless. He only remembered that after rushing towards Hayden for a second, he felt that his hand was about to touch him, and then there was no more. He already had this answer when he woke up. Although not reconciled, if Hayden used that trick from the beginning, I might just lose it. Qu D, who stared at the ceiling, had mixed emotions in his heart. Hearing this answer, Hayden didn't know what to think, as if there was a dull feeling. Even though he won with a knife to Qu D, but he couldn't bear it in a coma. If this happens to a stronger opponent, what should I do? Hayden stared at the wall of the ward a little lost. "Okay. All right." Tina, who was back to her usual state, clapped her hands and said, "What do you want to eat? When I finish eating, I will bring you something." "Meat." X2 Silent Hayden and Qu D yelled at the same time. The two who had just woke up felt that even if there was a whole head of Neptune in front of them, they could finish eating. The two people who were opponents before seemed to have a special tacit understanding between the two after the fight. Chapter 28 Reward afterwards, Devil Fruit previous chapter. Next chapter advertisement. Oh, right. At this moment, Smog, who was standing next to him, thought of something in his mind. He continued toward Hayden and said, "The instructor asked me to tell you that if you wake up, go directly to his office to find him. You can get the rewards you won after victory, congratulations." "Okay." Hayden nodded silently in response. He didn't look too excited when he heard the good news. Devil fruit seems to be a tasteless to oneself, and Zhanpakudao is the same. However, you can give Tina a devil fruit to eat, just because she hasn't eaten the iron fence fruit in the original book yet. Hayden thought about it immediately, and then moved his limbs. I can feel it, and there is no missing part. How can it seem to feel better than the original body? He couldn't understand the feeling coming from his body, so he shook his head and stopped thinking. Won't you train in the training camp today? Hayden looked at Smog and Tina in the room before he noticed. Tina and Smog, now the game is over, shouldn't they be training at this time? "Oh. This. The instructor asked us to take a few days off," Tina replied when he heard Hayden's question, chewing on something in her mouth and speaking vaguely. "Holiday. Because the assessment was over, we were given a few days off. Some were injured to cultivate, and some were to sum up the experience gained after fighting in the past few days." Small then answered Hayden. "Oh." At this time, the room suddenly calmed down, only the sound of Tina eating. Advertisement in 1502 of the Haiyuan calendar, a training camp of the Navy headquarters, the final winner of the half-year assessment. This is the first little trace I left in this world. Picking up his sleeve Baishui from the bed and placing it on his lap, Hayden thought silently while staring at Shu Baishui's knife. Although it looks very weak and boring, however, I finally did something. Hayden looked at Tina, Smog, and Qu D again, and he couldn't help but think of it, and I still have a group of friends. As if Hayden was obliterated by the original world and lost himself, his current life has gradually become more interesting, and he has recovered a little bit of vitality. It's just why it always feels like something is missing. After eating, Tina and Smog went out together, leaving Hayden and Qu D in this ward. Silent environment. Hey, why didn't you just use your trick at the beginning? Qu D, who had always been lying on the bed without moving, broke the silence. Since waking up, this thought has been entwined in his mind. At this time, he couldn't help but ask. As soon as Hayden heard this, he was in a good mood at the moment, and he smiled and replied to Qu D. Why do you use all your strength in the beginning, anyway? I will win in the end. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Suddenly thought of Wukong in Dragon Ball in his mind, and then blurted out. And I really like the feeling of fighting. Qu D didn't know how to pick it up, and he was shocked before continuing to say, thank you for the last. He seemed to say halfway. He also remembered that Hayden had slashed towards the place next to him before, instead of aiming at himself, but even then he still lost that move. Qu D's emotions became more complicated, staring at the ceiling and couldn't help but think back to when he accidentally ate the fruit of his animal system. At that time, he had already surpassed most of his peers under the guidance of his father, and after eating the devil fruit, he became stronger. However, I gradually became silent, and I also felt indifferent when looking at other people. In the end, I didn't expect that I ran into this guy. Even if he had used all the means, he still had no room for resistance when facing his last move. Advertisement. The guy who didn't know where he came from was just as my dad said. Monsters are all over the Great Route. Oh, you said the last thing. Hayden's mind also flashed the previous picture, isn't that of course, we're partners of justice. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but smile back. Blink of an eye. The two didn't wait a while before Tina brought lunch. The two of them who hadn't eaten in a few days gorged themselves and wiped out the large basket of food that Tina had brought in a few minutes. Afterwards, Hayden asked Tina what time it was, and Tina told him it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Hayden guessed that he hadn't got off work yet, or he would just go and get the things back. Although I have seen what the devil fruit looks like in the comics, I can just meet the real guys now. The condition of his own body was not serious, so Hayden, who was suddenly curious, did it as he thought of it. He told Tina that he could go back first, after paying goodbye to Qu D. He was still wearing a striped hospital gown at the moment. Hayden took his sleeves and Baishui walked to the window of the ward, and then jumped out of the window. After all, if you want to be discharged from the hospital freely, it must be a little troublesome, just in case you run into old Aunt Zia again. Hayden shivered at the thought of this. Zia Saidu, a doctor in the Navy headquarters, gender female, unknown position, unknown age, like Hayden, liked to twist Hayden's face. At the beginning, my body couldn't keep up with the high-intensity training, and I often came to the hospital. As a result, I occasionally ran into this attractive person but a devil in his heart. Seeing that I am short and handsome, I actually bully me all day long. He also inadvertently speeded up his pace. He had to move away from the hospital as soon as possible. The headquarters of the hospital and the huge naval fortress were separated in two places, but they were not far apart, and Hayden was there in no time. The naval fortress with a huge face of justice written on the front contains the various institutions that maintain the operation of the entire headquarters. Advertisement. During the Hayden period of 6 months, I only followed the green pheasant for the first time, and then visited the instructor's office several times during the training. He has never been to other places. You can have an intuitive feeling about the building of this Navy headquarters only from the outside, and the interior space is even more huge. Its twists and turns, if no one leads the way, Hayden doesn't want to explore it alone. Along the road in his memory, Hayden was standing in front of the instructor's office at this time, and after reporting that he knocked on the office door. There was a response from the room, and Hayden opened the door and walked in. I saw an elderly instructor looking at something at his desk in a spacious office with a simple style. Wait a minute. The instructor, who didn't look up, said immediately. Yeah. Hayden didn't care, standing beside him. After a while, the instructor finished his work and raised his head to look at Hayden. You. The instructor was taken aback when he noticed the clothes Hayden was wearing. Why did you come here in a hospital gown? He asked. Nothing, my body is fine, I asked the doctor to come out. Well, it's here to get things. What do you want to choose, fruit or knife? He stopped asking. Hayden immediately replied. Fruit. Then the instructor did not speak. Hayden stared at the instructor and took out a box from the drawer beside him. Here, that's it. The instructor said. The box in front of me contained the legendary devil fruit. You can gain superpowers if you eat them, and the things that can sell for 100 million Baileys even if you don't eat them are right in front of Hayden. At this moment, Hayden's hands were still shaking, holding the box in one hand, and slowly uncovering the lid with the other. A fruit with a black vertical stripe pattern is lying quietly inside. Chapter 29, The Legendary Taste. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Just one bite of the strange fruit in front of you can gain power from the devil. Noting the appearance of this fruit with black vertical stripes, Hayden couldn't get a clue as to what kind of devil fruit was it. What you hold in your hand is the superhuman threshold fruit. The instructor on the side noticed that Hayden looked at the contents of the box with a puzzled expression, and he suddenly answered. What? Hayden was a little confused. Sword fruit. Superman is the fruit of the sword. Can he turn himself into a sword? Hayden asked immediately. The instructor was also taken aback when he heard Hayden's reply. It's not the fruit of the sword, it's the fruit of the threshold. The instructor, who had seen the Devil Fruit Illustrated book, then said. The Devil Fruit Illustrated book says that fences can be created from any part of the body after use. Will be locked by a lock that turns into steel. Hayden listened carefully to the instructor's explanation of the power of the devil fruit. Create a fence. Isn't this the fruit that Tina ate as Black Threshold in the comics from now on? Knowing the future plot, Hayden immediately understood the ability of the fruit in his hand, and suddenly felt a little surprised that it was such a coincidence. But this doesn't seem to matter. Hayden went out as soon as the matter was settled, but the instructor stopped him. What are you going to do with that fruit? Did you eat it yourself? He looked at Hayden and asked. Huh? Hayden thought for a while and said, I don't want to eat. I'll go back and give it to Tina. The instructor, who got this answer, did not reply immediately. Advertisement. Hayden had his own special abilities. Although he didn't need to eat the devil fruit, he didn't expect that he would be willing to give the fruit called the secret treasure of the sea to others. Since it was a reward for victory, it was naturally at the disposal of the winner, and the instructor did not intend to say anything. Well, 2 days later is the day when training camp is assembled, remember the time, he then told Hayden. Yeah. After Hayden saluted the instructor, he opened the door and walked out. At this moment, Qu D didn't know what to do well and was sitting on the hospital bed. He watched Hayden swiftly turn in from outside the window, and asked Hayden strangely, Why don't you come in through the gate? Oh, go closer to the window. Hayden replied casually, as if returning to his own house. Shu Baishui's exercises that can backtrack her own abilities with a little carelessness, coupled with daily exercises, make this hospital indeed his second home. Hayden then put sleeve Shirayuki on the bedside table, took off his shoes and hugged the box on the bed. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. After so long, he hasn't taken a good time to relax. It turns out that the happy hour every night in the world has not been enjoyed for a long time. So now that I have 2 days, I only have half a day left, so I can lie down for a long time today, and try something that I seem to feel before tomorrow. Qu D next to him looked at the box that Hayden had brought back, and thought of the reward for this assessment. There should be devil fruits in it. Hayden, do you know what fruit you got? Qu D immediately asked Shangjung, who was sitting on the bed. Hayden was about to open the box and take another look. Hearing Qu D's question, Hayden replied, The threshold fruit of the Superman series is the ability to grow iron railings from his body. And many more. Speaking of this, Hayden realized that Qu D beside him had eaten devil fruit. Does this taste like the legend? Advertisement. Qu D, Ask you a question. Hayden no longer looked at the fruit in the box. Then he looked up at Qu D and asked, "How does the fruit taste when you eat it?" Curiosity was written on his face. But after hearing Hayden's question, the expression on his face suddenly became. How should I put it? The facial features on his face were all twisted together. At first glance at Qu D's face, I didn't realize that it was a human face. Hayden's question immediately evoked the memory of Qu D buried in his heart and was sealed, and the shackles of the seal were broken by only a short sentence. That feeling. Qu D never wanted to remember it again. Without Hayden waiting for Qu D's answer, he could know what the situation was from the expression on Qu D's face, and he felt a sense of gloating in his heart. The smell of the devil fruit in the comics was indeed true. But the atmosphere in the room gradually became silent at this time, and time slowly passed by. The lifeless sky also inadvertently darkened, and the time came to the evening. "Tina is here to bring you dinner." Tina, who slammed the door and walked in, frightened the two people in the ward. When I was idle for a while without much entertainment, Hayden was so bored that he fell asleep. He opened his eyes suddenly, and his vision was still a little trance. But Hayden, who was frightened, was still a little bit angry when facing Tina. Qu D on the other side immediately said thank you for taking the dinner. An important thing suddenly occurred in his mind, and Hayden, who was in a trance, immediately regained his spirit, and his expression seemed to be slightly invisible. "Sister, I'll find you a good thing to eat." Hayden immediately grabbed the box from the bedside table and opened it. Tina was walking towards Hayden, and she couldn't help feeling a little strange when she heard what he said. She looked puzzled. What is this kid doing? Hayden put the box on the bed, holding the devil fruit in both hands and slowly rising. "Look, this is the devil fruit I brought back from the instructor. I intend to eat it for you." Advertisement that fruit with a strange pattern, and what Hayden said, made Tina not understand what was going on right away for the first time. Or he walked to Hayden's bed casually and put his dinner down. "What are you talking about, brother?" Tina didn't understand. "Tina, this is the legendary devil fruit, the threshold fruit of the Superman. You can eat it quickly." Hayden put the fruit in Tina's palm and said, "Devil fruit?" Tina seemed to be slow for a few beats before reacting. "Why are you taking it to me?" The expression on her face instantly enriched, and even her mouth addiction was forgotten. "Big sister, haven't you seen my fight? I don't need devil fruit," Hayden replied immediately. He also remembered the Tina fight that he had seen before, and the strength was relatively good, but he ran into the guys on Momomaru. "Hey, speaking of it, where's the warrior Taumaru?" Hayden, who had no idea where he was crooked, shook his head and stopped thinking. "For Tina to eat?" Tina stared at the fruit in her hand blankly. Although she hadn't seen it with real eyes, she had also heard of the value of devil fruit. And Hayden actually gave it to himself. At this moment, Tina didn't know what she was thinking. "Hurry up," Hayden urged, holding Tina's hand to her mouth. As for Qu D next to him, he didn't know what to think when he saw this scene. The precious devil fruit was given away by Hayden as if he bought it from a fruit stand. At this time, Tina made a decision. She slowly brought the fruit in her hand to her mouth and bit down. Gudong. Tina swallowed. The chain reaction caused by the taste made Tina Zhao's good face unbearable to look directly at her. The taste of this moment will be remembered by her for life. Hayden's heart trembled when he saw this expression again at close range, and the taste was as terrifying as the legend. Chapter 30 Breath of Ice Sleeve by Shui. Previous chapter. Next chapter advertisement. Breath of Ice. On a misty morning, on a deserted beach. The vast blue ocean in front of me is still hidden in the veil of dawn. Hearing only the sound of the tide coming in his ears, the disturbing sound gave Hayden a trace of tranquility. Hayden was sitting with his eyes closed in front of an abandoned iron anchor on the beach. Enough for a person to hug the thick abandoned iron anchor. The roots do not know how deep into the beach, they have long been corroded by rust. Hayden, who had arrived here early, wanted to recall how he felt when he fought with Qu D to the last moment, after he cut a knife. At that time, as if my ears had lost their hearing, they automatically blocked most of the surrounding sounds, and the whole world suddenly became quiet. Then there was a strange sound, like someone exhaling in his ear. He seemed to feel the sound coming from the body of Zhanpakudao. After experiencing strange feelings, he would recall Suo Da's description of the breathing of all things, and it seemed to be similar to the previous feelings. However, at that time, the most critical moment was fleeting, and Hayden lost consciousness without figuring out the details. This will release the empty-minded Hayden, trying to remember the feeling of that time in his mind. Hayden closed his eyes, slowly letting go of his consciousness in the dark world, and extended his perception of everything around him with his own spiritual pressure. The sound of waves, the sound of unknown birds in the sky, the swimming of a stranded octopus, the sound of a small crab walking on the sand. The huge and incomparable information immediately returned to Hayden's perception. He tried to slowly filter out the noisy factors and tried to focus his mind on the white snow on the sleeves lying flat on his legs. Gradually, after a while, advertisement. The chaotic sound around was successfully blocked by him. At this time, only the sound of his own breathing and the sound of heart beating were left. Perhaps Hayden at this moment was completely different from the abandoned house before crossing, or perhaps he had some insights after the battle with Qu D. At this moment, the distracting thoughts that he had been unable to clear during the Blade Zen seemed to disappear at this moment. Then Hayden heard the voice passed to him by Shu Baishui. Open one's eyes. He clearly didn't understand the sleeve Baishui in front of him, but he seemed to see that the sleeve Baishui in front of him was exuding a shuddering chill. Phantom. Shu Baishui's blade gave him the breath-like sound that was naturally made when he was frozen in time. Shu Baishui seemed to be breathing cold air. Is this the breath of everything in this world? In the next second, Hayden wanted to feel the breath of all things again, and closed his eyes again. But this time, Hayden saw something different. The world in the dark was just a glimpse of the snow and ice world he noticed. However, the scene flickered and disappeared in his mind like a meteor. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Immediately, a lightning-like conjecture hit his brain. Swastika? It was natural to think of Hayden about the next stage of Zhanpakudao's liberation, and his emotions immediately became excited. There has been no progress in the acquisition of swastikas, and Hayden thought it was necessary to exchange points for swastikas. This time, the 0% progress finally rose a little, and Hayden couldn't help but feel a little happy. And it seems to understand the breath of all things? At this moment, Hayden was still unsure in his heart, and he grabbed his sleeve Baishui and stood up. Advertisement at this moment, the early morning fog has dispersed, and the surrounding scenes have become clearly visible. Hayden let go of his mind again, and all the sounds around him surged towards him like the tide nearby. Facing the anchor, which was bigger than him, his right hand relaxedly held sleeve Baishui and slowly raised his arm, with the blade facing the anchor. Close your eyes, inhale through your nose, and carefully feel the breath of the anchor in front of you. After that, Shirayuki held his sleeve casually in his right hand and gently dropped towards the anchor.
Open your eyes and exhale from your nose. The anchor in front of him in his sight had already cracked. It was still roughly intact just now, and he was cut off from the middle at this time, and the cut was smooth and flat, as if the iron anchor was a fake made of paper. Hayden, who closed his eyes just now, felt as relaxed as he was cutting a thin piece of white paper. Cut off the steel. Have I reached this level? Looking at the traces created by his own hands, Hayden stared in awe. Touching the threshold of the breath of all things, I was surprised that I was moving further towards Jianhao. Although it was possible to cut steel in the past, it was only because of the sharpness of Shirayuki's own. In the past, the slashes that slashed whatever you wanted to slash did not play a role after encountering Qu D. Qu D's body was as hard as a weight, and he couldn't cut him. But if I changed my current self, I guess I can win him without starting to solve. Hayden then held the sleeve Shirayuki tightly, and the blade was paddling randomly towards the anchor that was split in two. Boom, boom, boom. The anchor was instantly divided into unknown parts, and it fell on the sand and made a sound under the action of gravity. I'm a good boy. I'm so awkward. Different from the special effects of Shu Baishui's high budget, this silent and simple effect shocked Hayden even more. Advertisement. Then he immediately thought, I can cut steel, and I can cut everything. Then Hayden silently recited the famous kendo quote from the manga by Suo master Fu Kanshuro. Now it's time to try everything. Hayden said to himself and walked towards the woods on the edge of the beach. In a few steps, he walked to the edge of a tree where the leaves were hanging in front of him, feeling the feeling of breath of all things, and the white snow in his hands gently brushed the branches. Just a piece of white paper falling on the blade of the white snow in the sleeve can be cut, and now it is like cutting everything continuously. Shu Baishui swept the branches but did not cut them off. The illusory but true facts are presented in front of Hayden. So, the next step is the training of flying slash. After confirming that he had learned it, Hayden brushed the knife, flicked away the dust that was not on the knife, followed by pulling up a sword flower and retracting the knife into its sheath. He has changed the position of Zhanpakudao to his waist. After this series of battles, after waking up, he reviewed a lot of things and summarized them roughly. The first is the previous way of Shirayuki's back on his back. When fighting against people and drawing swords, there is always a feeling of scratching his back. So he decided to give up and change to wearing it around his waist. The second is his own strong hairstyle, which is very brisk when fighting, but lacks a kind of airy temperament. So he also decided to give up and keep his hair longer. The gurgling voice suddenly came from Hayden's stomach. He then raised his eyes to look at the sky, and he estimated that the time was almost there, and it was time to ask Tina and the others to have breakfast together. Then Hayden immediately turned around and got into the woods. Chapter 31. A new phase begins. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The day has come. Another day in Pirate World. Today is the day when the training camp gathers. Hayden, Tina, Smog and others also went to the school early. Then some people came in one after another, and finally the instructor appeared in front of them on time. All the trainees lined up, kept quiet and waited for the instructor's next step. After the assessment of the game, Hayden did not know what the instructor would arrange next, whether to continue the previous training, or what else. Standing in the middle of the team, Hayden couldn't help but squinted his eyes around. He found that there seemed to be fewer familiar people in the assembled team, and did not see Zhanpakudao Maru. Hayden felt a little strange, but at this time the instructor immediately interrupted his thinking. Your session is really the one that I have brought me the most disappointing. On weekdays, I am only satisfied with the prescribed training. I think I have some talent and don't put anyone in my eyes. Are you still decent? Do you still call it the future of the Navy like this? Also for justice. The normal instructor, who was still expressionless at first, suddenly seemed to explode, exuding the coercion of the strong and shouting at their group. A series of machine gun bullets relentlessly pounded on the faces of the group of people below. Everyone was confused. Why did the instructor suddenly start the fire? Look at the last Hayden and Qu D. Do you know how hard they worked in private? Look at the expressions of the two of you fighting at the end. I want to laugh a little. The instructor paused when he said this, and he couldn't bear it. It was not because of his age, but because his chest was a little stuffy as he watched the next generation of the new Navy's disappointment. The students below, look at me, I look at you, then look at the sky and the earth, looking at each other. Well, this is the end of the matter, you can take care of it yourself. Advertisement. After speaking, the instructor paused, and then the instructor thought for a while and motioned to the person who said he had read the name to come forward. Hayden, Qu D, Smog, Tina, the above 4 students. The instructors finished reading one by one and watched the 4 of them have left the team. He then continued. You were selected to join the new barracks led by General Zepha, and report to General Zepha immediately after the meeting is disbanded. Wow! The team behind immediately screamed. How many of them were promoted to the training camp of General Zepha in advance? And why was Tina also selected? Countless question marks appeared on the heads of the group of people behind. Be quiet, the instructor shouted, extinguishing the noisy students. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi, he frowned and said, as for the rest of the people, continue training after disbanding. The majesty of the instructor made them dare not ask any more, and they could only accept the order honestly. Hayden in front of the team looked at the 3 of Tina, Smog and Qu D next to him, and thought to himself. The promotion should be that I was the last winner. Although Qu D was second, he also showed his strength and devil fruit. Smog is because he is a natural fruit ability. So Tina, although her strength is not bad, there are people of similar level in the training camp. Is it because she also ate devil fruit? Immediately, the instructor gave a dissolution instruction, and the team behind him immediately dispersed. Hayden was very excited about joining the training camp led by Admiral Zepha. He was awarded the title of Black Fist at the age of 34 and was promoted to Admiral at the age of 38. At the same time, he set a record for the youngest admiral. Together with Warring States and Carp, they are the generals of the Navy in this period. Advertisement. During this period, Zepha also cultivated outstanding naval forces for the future, including some middle-level and high-level admirals. Under the guidance of the general, the speed of your own strength promotion will become even faster. Hayden and Tina left the schoolyard after saluting the instructor. The four of them went all the way to the position of the Navy headquarters, which was where General Zepha was. At this time, the four-person team became Qu D leading the way. Hayden, Tina, and Smog, all three of them are newcomers. As for Qu D, his father is a major general in his department, and his home is on Momanosuke Island. Qu D once went to General Zepha with his father once, and he should still remember the way. The group of four stepped onto a huge step that was as high as 90 degrees and climbed one of the countless gates of the naval fortress. With twists and turns, Hayden has lost his way inside the fortress. His grandmother was very tall, and after Qu D's back, Hayden was a little dizzy as he walked around. Staring at the back of Qu D in front of him, he finally stopped at the corner in front, and the three people behind followed closely. As they could see, an unusually large space inside appeared before their eyes. In the middle of the field, there are many people in Navy uniforms doing their own training. It's not the situation in the novice camp before, but just some boxing skills without special effects, or some swordsmanship training. And here, the situation of the capable person seems to be inconspicuous. Variety. All kinds of weird things came out. Bang bang bang. Bang, 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 and bang, sound from time to time around the venue. Even the ordinary push-ups were added with special effects by these people, holding out the afterimages. Advertisement. The Hayden Four walked in slowly and walked towards a clearly divided area in the middle of the field. The purple-haired, burly General Zepha was in the center of the field, as if guiding the person opposite him, and that person was attacking General Zepha. With a punch and kick, he tried his best to greet General Zepha's body, but it was useless. When General Zepha yawned, he easily blocked all his tricks, as simple as breathing. I had noticed the people a long time ago, and General Zepha waited for the four of them to approach and said to the student opposite him, "Okay, here it is." Then General Zepha looked at Hayden's side. "Are you the recruits today?" General Zepha asked immediately without hesitation. Following the movements of General Zepha, the rest of the people around who were training also stopped and couldn't help looking at General Zepha's side. Keeping staring at the four of them as they walked to General Zepha, they had already thought of watching a good show in their hearts. This is fun. Well, today is the day of promotion below. I just don't know if these rookies are good. An old fritter suddenly chuckled and said, "Hey, who are you waiting to go to the fine traditions? I heard that there is a recruit who can release the same abilities as Lieutenant General Kuzan. There is also a powerful guy who seems to have eaten an animal devil fruit. Freezing ability. How is it possible? As for the animal fruit, haven't you seen it? A veteran who was lifting a ton of barbell and playing like an ordinary stick hee. Boom. After a sound of the ground, he threw the barbell on the ground. Relaxing the body after the exercise, turning the neck, the body makes a crackling noise. Don't talk about 1 to 2, even if they are all 4, I can easily take it. He stared at the 4 Hayden and said lightly. Chapter 32 Another one to pretend to be. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Yes, Master Zepha. X4. The 4 Hayden saluted and responded immediately upon hearing Zepha's question. After understanding the incoming person, General Zepha looked at the 4 Hayden who had just arrived one by one, and his gaze stayed on each of them for a while. A swordsman with special abilities, an animal fruit, a natural fruit, and a superhuman fruit. The configuration is complete. Zepha, who stared at the four of them before speaking, couldn't help but nodded. He looked at the four little guys and didn't ask any more, and said, "First of all, this is the new barracks I lead, and it can also be called the elite camp. I was also divided into two groups here. One group is in the headquarters, where I continue to receive my special training, and the other group is taken by me to the Great Route to catch pirates for real combat." Speaking in a flat tone, General Zepha paused for a moment and wanted to look at the four people in front of him. If there was a fearful reaction after hearing this sentence, it would still be. However, the reactions of the four were completely different from what Zepha had anticipated at this time. There was a slight movement on Qu D's face, who had been instilled since he was a child. Smog, who was still full of enthusiasm at this time, was the same, fantasizing that he would return with the pirates who used his natural ability to grasp one ship after another. A weird green light glowed in Hayden's eyes, and he imagined the exchange points of the skill tree. 110 million is 100 points, 200. Grab a few more to exchange the skills you want. As for Tina, she didn't seem to hear what General Zepha said, and she seemed to be thinking about the waiting lunch in her head. Haha, four interesting little ghosts. The arc of Zepha's mouth, who was expressionless, raised to himself. He went on to say, "This is different from the place where you stayed before. All the people who came here belong to the elites from the Navy of the world, or the whole world. The naval base has found talented people, as well as people I like. Here we'll conduct an elimination assessment every year, and dozens of them will be eliminated directly from the bottom of the ranking. Don't think about what you did before. I believe that the people here can be stronger than you." Speaking of this, General Zepha looked around and looked at other students. "Okay, you are now in the group that exercises in the headquarters. These days we will continue the training we have been doing before, and I will give you individual guidance in a few days." After that, Zepha planned to step aside and look at the situation of other people. After just taking a step, by the way, if you don't understand anything, you can ask someone for it yourself. After speaking, General Zepha walked away. X4. Advertisement. The squatting group at home and the hunting group at home. Hayden, a primary school student, looked up at the purple-haired, burly and magnificent Zepha, and listened to a series of explanations. Hayden was suddenly confused. Smog and Qu D didn't react much for a while. Isn't it rumored that General Zepha's training camp is the devil? Was it so easy on the first day? The three people who were mentally prepared in advance seemed to have done all the preparations for the exam questions, and the result came and told me that there was no need to take the exam. Apart from the ease, there was a slight weirdness, and the three people except Tina were a little bit uncomfortable in their hearts. Hayden looked at the unfamiliar environment around him, planning to find a vacant place to continue to return to his usual training program. At this time, a guy who was taller than the tallest of the four of them, Qu D, walked straight towards them. Hayden, Qu D, and Smog could clearly feel the hostility from this person. What is this guy doing? The three of Hayden couldn't help but stared at each other and asked. "I'm coming. I didn't expect to see a good show today. Although the guy Happy's name means happy, but his methods don't mean happy. Let's just stay aside and see what the newcomer has." Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. The people around who were exercising at this time all put down the things in their hands, and gradually gathered around the place where the Hayden Four and Hippie stood, forming a loose circle with the mentality of watching the excitement. General Zepha, who was still here, didn't want to control his thoughts. He stood not far away with his chest and was ready to observe. Every time a newcomer comes, some old fried dough sticks in this elite camp will try to find a newcomer with the idea of having fun. Let them see how good I am, and understand clearly what position they are in this camp. This is what they call a fine tradition. Hey, I heard that you guys are amazing. Who is the best one of you? How about we make two gestures? The four Hayden looked at the hilarious guy in front of him. He looked proudly taller than them, and his body was also the kind of muscular figure that was tempered to the extreme. Between his gestures, he showed the explosive power in his body, and he was talking as if he was looking down at them. Oh roar, is this a typical veteran who comes to find a new recruit to disarm him? Hayden had this idea immediately in his mind. Advertisement. However, After hearing this sentence, Hayden's expression did not change, and Qu D and others just frowned slightly and watched him silently. At this time, Hayden was wearing a navy big soldier uniform, a hat with Marine on his head, and Shirayuki's sleeve on his left waist. I am, Hayden said lightly, but where did you come out again? Hayden greeted the enemy on the surface, but his thoughts were running fast in his heart, thinking about the next move. According to the person in front of him at this moment is a guy of the physical skill type, what he will use first, what response he should use, and what tricks he should use to be more compelling. F ked. This newcomer is terrible. Hurry up and call a doctor to get ready. Hayden's voice was not loud, but it was enough to make it clear to the students watching the theater next to him. This guy treats Hippie with this attitude, so he can only ask for his own blessing. Hayden's tone, as well as his expression when speaking, looked at him as if he were an ant. Heipai immediately got angry. You guy who just climbed up from below, so bold and dare to speak to me with this attitude. Well. How do you dare to make two gestures? Heipai asked, clenching his teeth a little bit without losing his mind. Whatever you do, how do you compare? I think you are a swordsman. Use it as you wish. I don't need weapons. It's just one-on-one. Just click and stop. Well, a few words between the two are settled. Immediately Hayden asked Tina and the others to step aside. Tina and the others were not worried about whether Hayden would lose, their expressions were very relaxed. At this point, only Hayden and Hippie were left in the center of this venue. Hippie jumped 2 steps in place, twisted his body, and moved the muscles not long after the exercise. Hayden's left hand stabilized Shirayuki's scabbard with his thumb resting on the blade, while his right hand was holding the handle of the knife tightly, his figure lowered and his eyes fixed on Hay. On the surface, the difference in height between the two is not of the same level. There is also a certain degree of difference between the muscle condition of one and the muscle condition of the other. With the exception of Kai Hayden's knife, he had a weapon advantage, and the other veterans of the elite battalion could not see any chance of winning for this newcomer. However, this might as well their idea of watching a good show. General Zepha not far away couldn't help but concentrate, remembering what Kuzan said about the kid Hayden. No wind can blow in the indoor space. Advertisement. Hayden and Hippie were both ready at this time, and they stared at each other closely. Boom. Hippie moved first, and the gravel splashed under the feet he stepped on. However, seeing Hippie rushing towards him, Hayden didn't panic, and didn't intend to move a step. The thumb pushed out the sleeve baishui, and the right hand suddenly pulled out the blade, pouring the spiritual pressure on the blade and cutting it out in the direction of Hippie. Draw a knife and cut Ban Yu Bing. The ice light flashed, and 3,000 operations were made within 1 second, and the spirits gathered to draw a special half-moon-shaped flying slash. In a way that Hippie didn't even think of, and in a way that he couldn't react at all, it hit him directly in the chest. Boom. With a sound, the pure white chill exploded on him, covering his figure in an instant. Question mark. Wait, what happened just now? That slash, flying slash. How can the newcomer be this level? What happened in an instant was so fast that none of the people in the elite camp understood what happened just now. After a while, the fog dissipated, showing Hippie's figure at this time, and his body was frozen in a block of human-shaped ice. Wow. The elite camp students who were watching the battle were immediately shocked. But Hayden, the instigator, took the knife into its scabbard leisurely and stood in place. Then there was another boom. The frozen Hippie suddenly broke open the ice block that trapped him, and he stood in place, breathing quickly and gasping for breath, his body still exuding a trace of chill. ITM. Heipai gang wanted to scold. Result. General Zepha had no idea when he stood between the two of them and called the match to a halt. Hayden shrugged indifferently, and walked over after finding Tina and the others. This is as simple as eating water and food for Hayden. Chapter 33 I will. Next one. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Time flickered for a few more days. During the period, the 4 of Hayden continued to practice according to the original training method without stopping, and waited quietly for the instruction of General Zepha. The 4 Hayden who have just arrived, haven't had much contact with other people for the time being. And because when he first came, Hayden stopped the guy from Hippie as soon as he took action. Although teacher Zepha stopped the contest, they can all see that these newcomers are a bit uncomfortable. Look like. So in the past few days, Hayden and the others just found an empty place on the training ground to practice. At this time, General Zepha, who had just arrived at the training ground, stood at the gate and looked around. After finding the location of the Hayden 4, he walked towards them, obviously intending to find them. Now, Hayden was suspending a large rock from the body of the white snow sword and making a slow swing of the knife. This was one of the ways he exercised his arm muscle strength in order to keep his arm steady while holding the knife. Tina has been releasing the black iron fence, releasing it with a bang, and then immediately retracting it, increasing the release speed of her ability not long after she has acquired it, and she can also get exercise while her ability consumes physical strength. For Smog, who is a natural person, his physical strength is a big problem, so he has been working on projects that can improve his physical fitness. And Qu D was practicing a boxing technique that Hayden couldn't understand, and his fisting style seemed to be a bit of a boxing technique. After a while, General Zepha walked to the four of them and coughed. Noting that General Zepha was standing next to them, the four people who had been sweating profusely lined up immediately, stood upright, and waited for Zepha's instructions. General Zepha didn't speak for the first time, watching the four little guys in front of him at the moment, watching their physical condition. Advertisement. It was only a few hours in the morning that he had already exercised like this, at least he was not lazy, it was okay, he thought to himself in his heart. Immediately afterwards. Today I will give you some guidance and training. General Zepha said, but first of all, I want you to test your power value first. Speaking of this, General Zepha looked at the one on the left. A very strange machine in their eyes. Dao power. Hayden was a little surprised when he heard this familiar term, but Tina and the others didn't understand it. They turned their heads neatly to the direction where General Zepha was looking. In the huge indoor training ground, the area of the wall is naturally enlarged. In Hayden's field of vision, he noticed that there was a machine that was used to test boxing strength in the game hall of the previous world. It was placed next to the wall. It was just that the machine displayed a completely different value. The thing like a thermometer on the back extended to a very large extent. Very high. Hayden had discovered this thing before, but he didn't know what the machine did. Test power value. Hayden followed General Zepha and looked at the machine getting closer and closer. He was a little curious about his current power value. General Zepha, who was walking in the front, suddenly said, "You can call me teacher in the future." Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Yes, Teacher Zepha. The four of them responded immediately after a daze. Then, they walked to the power test machine. The noise made by Hayden a few days ago caused other students in this elite camp to become curious about them, and they couldn't help slowing down the ongoing training, focusing on Hayden and the others. Okay, one by one, just hit the round object directly. Zepha said, pointing to the object on the machine. But you don't need to care too much about this Dao power value. This thing does not reflect your strength in detail, it is just a reference. Zepha added. After the four expressed their understanding, they walked towards the machine one by one. Advertisement. As stated in the original manga, assuming an ordinary seaman's power value is 10, then as long as it exceeds 500, it can be called a Superman. All four used their full strength to hit the test machine. Hayden. 487. Qu D. 565. Small. 469. Tina. 321. The above is the result of all four Hayden tests, displayed on the top. What? I thought those newcomers were so awesome. The one whose name is Qu D is okay. The one I was looking for before, didn't he say that he is the best of them? It's just average. At this time, the people in the elite camp were mixed in two groups. The hunting group was in a short period of rest. Those who had seen the Great Root didn't think it was any surprise, and they returned to their respective exercises after being quite bored. Hayden looked at the display as just a numerical value, without any idea in his mind, even if it was more than 500, even if he was Superman, he had no idea. After the test, Hayden turned to Zepha and waited for the next step. Is acceptable. Zepha nodded after looking at the results of the 4 of them, and said, "Next, I will teach you the 6 Navy style. Where you stayed before, should you know what the Navy 6 style is?" "Yeah, X4. Advertisement." Afterwards, Zepha quickly told them 4 of the basic principles of shaving, one of the 6 types. Hayden had already seen it before, and he could complete a longer distance only after his physical fitness increased by 1 step, and he wouldn't be close to scrapping after using his feet several times. As the 4 of them were meditating, Zepha then added, "You will double the amount of your usual training from now on. Then I will teach you the next pose tomorrow. Double." After hearing this instruction from teacher Zepha, Smog was stunned immediately and couldn't help looking at Qu D. The expression on his face was almost the same as his own. They are tired after the usual training volume every day, so they have to double it again. Small can't help looking at Hayden again. What is Hayden's reaction? Small did not understand what Hayden meant. As soon as Hayden finished listening, he almost reacted at the first time. The self before crossing in his heart was crying. Then suddenly, there was an inexplicable heart palpitations in his heart. Then I immediately recalled the plot of the comics. It seemed that people in this pirate world had no limit to their physical fitness. The only factor that restricted them to becoming stronger was the difference in talents of each individual. The feeling of inexplicably driving me to become stronger reappeared, and I was actually satisfied with the level of exercise before. Since it doubles again, it doubles. He kicked himself in the original world, and an indescribable impulse was stirred up in Hayden's heart. Hayden, who had been beaten up with blood, ignored the 3 people next to him. He thought that since he was already able to shave, then there was a general in front of him, so he could ask him what the next formula was. Looking at Zepha in front of him, Hayden raised his hand and said immediately, "Teacher Zepha, I already know how to shave, what's next?" Chapter 34 Brother, forget it. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Haiyuan calendar 1507. At a certain location on the Great Route, the sea is clear and the view is good. Before he knew it, Hayden had lived in the pirate's different world for so long, and he felt that he was assimilated into the original native of this world. In a few years, Hayden, who turned into a child at the beginning, of course, has gotten rid of the awkward height of elementary school students as he grows older. The distance measured a few months ago has been at least 1.8 meters away. The facial features gradually opened up with age, returning to the former handsomeness. From the appearance of a primary school student, he looked like he was handsome at first glance, and he couldn't control it. Hayden's hair has been kept since he joined the elite camp until now. Only when the hair exceeds the position of the chin will he cut his hair slightly. The shape of the muscles all over the body was tempered into the most perfect state of age at this stage. The muscles are not bloated or slender, and they are kept in a perfect balance. Now, Hayden is a member of the outing hunting group of the elite camp. This time, I don't know how many times he has set sail. He hasn't counted it. After all, it is a trivial matter. Hayden and the others boarded a warship equipped with the standard configuration of the Navy headquarters. Under the seat of General Zepha, the entire hunting group of 20 or 30 people was a single ship, and only one of them sailed on this great route of dangerous clusters. From the first time I set sail a year ago, I saw a pirate group completely different from the Straw Hat group. People in the entire town were brutally killed. The absurd and brutal scene made Hayden, a well-educated man who had been trained in the past, couldn't bear it. Even in the original world, seeing some news reports are people being killed, not to mention the big mood swings in my heart, there will be some emotions. Not to mention that the group of pirates was just for fun, and for ordinary people in the whole town, they might just snatch away something short of passing by, and then destroyed the town by the way. Hayden, who has gone to sea for a year, has seen too much. At that time, he also made a decision to stay in the Navy like this, with the ability that God bestows on him, he decided to do something good. Although it is known from future plots, of course there are some bad and corrupt things inside the Navy. However, it is better to eliminate the pirate camp as soon as possible. As for the world government, Tianlongren and the like are handled in the same way. After waiting for yourself to have enough strength, then you will directly get rid of the roots of corruption within the Navy, and rebuild in destruction. At this time, in the gym on the warship. 997. 998. 999. Advertisement. Hayden was shirtless with his upper body, his body parallel to the floor, and his sweat-drenched hair naturally hung down to the ground, supporting his body with only the 4 fingers of one hand. And on his back, there was a scale marked 5T, impressively. This exaggerated scene is nothing strange to Hayden, and the expression on his face has not changed at all to this extent. Before arriving at his next destination, Hayden spent his time at sea like this, and there was really no fun on the boat. In the next second, 1,000 push-ups were completed, and Hayden stood up directly. Boom. Regardless of the weight on the back, the weight immediately slammed the floor. Fortunately, the material of the warship was invincible. Then Hayden flicked back the wet hair, blocking his vision with both hands, exposing his face, and then moved the muscles of his whole body. Hey, this body is almost loose, Hayden said to himself, then looked at the rest of the gym. There were some people in the gym when he started, but now they are gone. Hayden couldn't help muttering, hey, what about the others? There were people in the gym before, why are they gone now? He was puzzled. The puzzled Hayden immediately bent down, picked up the ice he had prepared in advance from the floor, and was shocked. If Hayden was asked to say one good thing about traveling into this world, it would be that the happy water of the fat house was always there, not far away from him. But the others were gone, and Hayden didn't care too much. He picked up the towel next to him and went straight to the bathroom. Opening parenthesis. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. It didn't take long. After washing his body and putting on a uniform, Hayden walked out of the gym. At this moment, Hayden was still wearing the original uniform of the big Navy soldier, and he had a green pheasant on his head wearing the same eye patch, not only for shading, but also for the front hair bangs not to block the view. Hayden's current rank is still the original recruit, but their new barracks are not real recruits. At this stage, the rank is not their main consideration. As long as you can pass the graduation examination from this elite battalion, you will be awarded the rank of the highest brigadier general and the lowest rank of the Navy headquarters. Your own strength is the primary goal of each of them. The location of the gym is located on the second floor of the facilities on the deck, with the gate facing the bow of the ship. The sleeves by Shahadeng hung on his side naturally stayed on, his left hand was placed on the handle of the knife, his expression looked dull after warming up. As soon as he got out of the cabin, Hayden noticed something was wrong. Advertisement. The warship under our feet was about to sail to the shore of an unknown island. Hayden frowned slightly. Where is this again? No one had told him beforehand. At this time, the other people on the ship gathered on both sides of the deck below and looked forward, and the expressions on their faces seemed to be a little curious. Hayden jumped directly from the second floor to the deck below, and asked someone curiously, Larry, what's the situation? The person named Larry looked back and said, it's Hayden. Teacher Zepha just received a message saying that someone wants to borrow our boat to take a ride. Oh. After listening, Hayden looked around and found no Teacher Zepha. Hayden stepped directly to the height of the bow, and his vision was immediately clear. As the warship slowly approached the shore, Hayden, who stood tall and looked far away, noticed something in his sight. A guy with no clothes on his upper body was approaching in the direction of the boat. Hayden has a feeling that this is the person who seems to be picking up. But this person is that one, so there is such a card to take Zepha's downwind boat. The figure who had only seen him disappeared suddenly, and Hayden lost the capture of his figure. In the blink of an eye, the man appeared out of thin air. Bang, bang, bang. The man made a peculiar sound of stepping on the moon step, and stepped into the air towards the warship. As the distance between them and the man narrowed, the figure of the man became clear. It was a man who looked about the same age as Hayden. Oh, how can you still walk every month? That person is not a Navy uniform because of his origin. Other people watching the excitement on the deck behind them were chatting. After all, the days on the sea can be boring sometimes. Suddenly, a huge sea king sprang out from under the calm blue sea. The dark green skin, the figure exposed on the sea surface is estimated to be bigger than the warship under the feet, and the open blood basin is aimed at the person in the air at this time. Oh roar. Who is going to solve that Sea King class? Advertisement. There was a discussion immediately behind Hayden, but it did not cause panic. Any one of them could solve the Sea King, but it was a question of who would save that person. Let me. Hayden, who was standing at the bow of the ship, said that his right hand was grasped on the handle of Shu Baishui's knife, his expression a little moved. Just after warming up, Hayden would use you to sharpen his knife, and Hayden thought to himself as he stared at the head of the Sea King. After hearing Hayden's words, the group of people behind him stopped discussing, and the atmosphere fell silent. Draw a knife and chop. Immediately, a pure white slash flew straight towards the head of the Sea King. With his hand up and the knife dropped, Hayden, who was standing casually, just swung his sleeve Baishui in the direction of Neptune. In an instant, the slash had already cut the Sea King class. It's still Hayden's slash that looks great. Indeed, it looks like an ordinary swing of a knife can cut out great power. The other elite camp students who have been with Hayden for so long, but every time they see Hayden's beheading, they can't help but secretly nod their heads in admiration. Even if it was divided into two and eliminated the Neptune class, its remnant body fell afterwards and caused a splash of spray. During this time, the man in the air also stepped onto the deck of their warship. I can do it myself, you don't need to do it. The young man with no upper body clothes, black trousers on his lower body and huge scars behind his back, he said coldly to Hayden, with a very stinky expression on his face. Ha. Hayden, who had already closed his sleeves, put his left hand on the handle of the knife, and a question mark appeared on his head. Thank you, would it be better? He replied. Humph. The man then snorted coldly, then ignored the group of them and walked towards the cabin. Damn it. Hayden most annoyed someone pretending to be in front of him. Are you that green onion again? It's still like that if you saved your life. Hayden said as he jumped from the bow of the ship, just about to step forward and hold the man. Big brother. Forget it. This action caused a group of elite camp members to quickly grab Hayden and stop him. They knew Hayden's temper, as long as it didn't provoke him. If it provokes him. Moreover, Hayden's strength is stronger than all of them. There is no solution, almost no solution, so they can only hold Hayden from letting him pass. Chapter 35 Command of the Empty Marshal, Destination Kingdom, Recommendation Ticket. Please collect. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The next day, Hayden and the others sailed on the Great Sea Route, and their warship sailed to the G2 Naval Branch. After sending the previous man, the supplies on the warship were supplied as usual, and he set off again without making too many stops. After leaving the branch port for a period of time. Blah 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 blue. Blah 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 blue. At this time, General Zepha rang the phone worm in the room. The phone worm has broken purple hair on its head, and the color of its skin is also purple, and the volute behind it is shiny black, as if it had been attached to a layer of armed color. Blue brew. Gap. General Zepha, who was sitting at his desk, put down the report in his hand, grabbed the phone worm's microphone, and said, Say. Zepha. The phone worm imitated the caller's voice, his voice low. There are not many people who know him as a phone bug, and he is very familiar with this voice. It is the current Marshal of the Navy Headquarters Kong. Okay. You are not far from G2, are you? I need you to go to the nearby kingdom of Kamabaka to take their King Ambrio Ivankov. Huh. Zepha frowned while holding the microphone, thinking about the kingdom of Kamabaka. Why are they going to imprison their king? Then Zepha asked doubtfully. Kamabaka Kingdom King. What happened? The king used her ability to turn the kings of other countries who visited her into that. This has a very bad influence on the world government, so I need you to solve it as soon as possible. That. Zepha was still a little confused for the first time after listening, and then suddenly thought of something. There is another name in the kingdom of Kamabaka, Peach Paradise, Peach Island. That place was the place of those guys, and turned a king into that is to say. Advertisement. Thinking of this, Zepha, a tough guy who has experienced many battles, couldn't help feeling trembling in his heart, and his body trembled. Understood. Zepha replied immediately. Remember that Ambrio Ivankov is taken into custody, and the rest of them don't care about them. Okay. Happiness. Zepha put the phone on the phone to end the call, then stood up and walked in the direction of the door and pushed open the door. The location of Admiral Zepha's room is located on the middle floor of the building on the warship. Once you open the door, you can clearly see the situation on the deck below. The trainees of the elite camp on the deck are doing various training in 2s and 3s. Hey! Zepha amplifies the voice below to draw attention. Hearing Teacher Zepha's voice from above, a group of students on the deck immediately stopped their movements, looked up at Teacher Zepha's direction, and waited for orders. Let's go ahead and change the destination. Now I have received the new mission above to go to the kingdom of Kamabaka. Yes. X 123,456,789. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. The students, including Hayden, responded together, and then they saw Teacher Zepha immediately went back to the room. After disbanding, Hayden didn't plan to continue to exercise anymore, inserting the sleeve Shirayuki into the sheath. He was a little surprised in his heart. He actually changed the task temporarily, and it was still an order from above. Hayden then guessed based on the memory of the very little information in his mind about the plot. Since it is what Zepha teacher, the current general and chief instructor of the Naval Academy, said, it must be the Marine Headquarters Marshal who has only appeared in the original book a few times, or it is an order from the world government. Except for the emotional fluctuations that occurred during the first time sailing, the missions from the next year to today did not make Hayden too energetic, of course, except for the fact of obtaining redemption points. But the opponents he ran into were really weak and pitiful. Even if they are only sailing on the first half of the Great Route, this should not be the case with the pirates. Advertisement. Hayden thought about the reasons for this when he was fine. The Navy now has the combat power of more than 4 generals: Marshal Sky, Sengoku of Buddha, Iron Fist Kapu, and Black Wrist Zepha. At the beginning of the plot in the original book, the 3 Navy officers of that period were all over 50 years old, and the youngest pheasant was also 50. It is now in 1507 of the Haiyuan calendar, and the time has been pushed back more than 10 years ago to the present. The age of those 3 generals is not too young, and their respective strengths are not at their peak and basically not much different. Rounding up this way, the Navy has a total of 7 generals on the sea, which can be said to be the pinnacle of combat power. That should be it. Hayden, who has been reading the newspaper from time to time, did not notice any real big things happening on the sea during this period. It can be said to be peaceful and very quiet. From another perspective, those powerful pirates may have become low-key and hid during this period. In general, Hayden still felt that this temporary change of mission was not a big deal. Hayden then asked the person next to him how to go to this Kamikaba kingdom. How long does it take? The person who was asked questions by Hayden just next to him had seen the distribution of islands in the nearby sea. Oh, that is the kingdom of Kamabaka. We should be there in a few hours, he replied. Oh. Hayden nodded and didn't ask anything more. Since there are only a few hours, I don't want to play barbells anymore. Although Teacher Zepha hasn't said what the task is, it is a task that does not require much effort, but it is still necessary to keep the spirit. Thinking of this, Hayden also thought that these few hours can be used to sleep. Immediately, Hayden took a shower first, then found a lounge chair and moved to a place on the deck where no one was standing, and fell asleep steadily. Pull down the blindfold to cover your eyes. Advertisement. In just a few hours, he opened and closed, and someone woke him up. Pull the blindfold upwards, and immediately open your eyes. The natural light that came immediately stimulated his eyes, and the eyes that had been in the dark environment for the first time did not adapt to a little blur. Hayden couldn't help but rubbed his eye sockets twice. His vision became clear. Okay. The head of Teacher Zepha, who appeared in front of his sight, scared Hayden and quickly got up. Anyone who opens his eyes and sees the head of a burly old man will be shocked. Teacher Zepha. Hayden stood up and saluted immediately. Haha. Hayden, you little devil, is still very leisurely. Zepha said with a chuckle. He didn't care much either. After all, this kid, Hayden, judging from the speed of his current advancement, the future position of the Admiral of the Navy can only be done by waiting for this kid's merits. Stand back in the queue. Zepha then said toward Hayden. Hayden also noticed that the other people next to him had already lined up, and he immediately stood in and lined up. Now I talk about the situation of this mission. The target is the king of the Kamabaka kingdom. I will take a group of people to the island to take the king and leave a group of people to guard on the warship. Next, the person whose name I read will go with me to the island. Hayden. Hearing his name, Hayden was not surprised. Bedwell. The student with the nickname Hippie had a slight surprise, not because he was selected, but because he and Hayden were selected together. Then the names of some people were read, and a team of 11 people came out with General Zepha. Chapter 36 Women's Clothing and Men Drifting Recommendation Ticket. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The Great Route, the peach-colored island, where the kingdom of Kamabaka is located. However, it has another reputation, one of the 3 daughter islands on the Great Route. Its king is Ambrio Evikov, known as the strongest female king in the history of the Man of Miracle. That is, the ladyboy king who helped the protagonist Lu Fei escape from Propulsion City in the original work. However, Hayden, who only heard the term Kamabaka Kingdom, didn't think of anything and didn't attract his attention. A few hours later, the warships of Hayden's recruiting barracks sailed to the waters near Peach Island. Thanks to the Navy's internal control of the island situation in the first half of the Great Route, they were able to reach Peach Island in a short time. The first thing I noticed was the observer in the observation room at the top of the warship. Today, the weather in the sea where they are located is exceptionally good, cloudless and sunny. At the farthest point of the visible line of sight, a brilliant rainbow appeared first. The 7 colors flashed dazzlingly, bright but not dazzling. Then there is a huge heart-shaped mountain. On the left and right, there are 2 heart-shaped hills that have been adjusted down to the same proportion as the big one, and then there are smaller hills. The vegetation on the island is filled with pink color without exception, and it seems that even the exposed mountain structure has been given a hint of pink. Hayden stood on the deck and looked over, feeling quite surprised. The island scenery on the Great Route was indeed ever-changing, and his expression was a little excited. Another advantage of traveling to Pirate World is that you can see all kinds of beautiful scenery. And depending on the situation on this island, this should be the style of many young ladies. There may be many young ladies on the island waiting for him to pamper him. Advertisement. With a lot of thought in his mind, Hayden felt that his sleeve Baishui was a little bit hungry and thirsty. And Bedwell next to him noticed the expression on Hayden's face at the moment. He looked stunned, and thought to himself, this guy Hayden doesn't know the situation on this island, right? Why did his saliva flow out? Bedwell, who is nicknamed Hippie, is really puzzled at this moment. Does he actually like this style? Thinking that Bedwell had an idea in his heart, he asked Hayden. Hey, Hayden, do you know the situation on this island? Yeah. Hayden recovered from his fantasy when he heard Bedwell's question next to him. I don't know. He replied, how does he know what the Kaba Kingdom Island is? Don't know. Bedwell was stunned by Hayden again, and his mind immediately turned. Do you know that this island has a nickname? He lowered his voice and approached Hayden, and then said, the island can also be called the Daughter Island. I heard that the island is full of beautiful sisters. Bedwell looked genuine. Come on Frozen Knee. .jpg. Looking at him, Hayden was a little unbelieving at first, then changed his mind. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Hey, this Dogby, although the process of getting to know him was not very pleasant at first, he was also a swordsman, and he fell in love with him after he switched to Tang swords. After no grievances, the relationship with him will not be called a good brother, but at least he will not lie to himself. The corners of Hayden's mouth, who immediately figured it out, couldn't help but curl up, and said with a smile toward Bedwell, good brother, good brother. By the way, he patted his shoulder. This task shouldn't be troublesome. I'll find a chance to stay on the island for a while. Hayden added. Bedwell also nodded like Hayden's expression to indicate that he understood, staring at Hayden with a smile and did not speak. In this way, the two of them hid on the side and smiled together. Advertisement. Teacher Zepha. A small boat is blocking the course on the sea ahead. The seaman standing in the observation room at the top yelled at the report. Although I have seen Peach Color Island, the warship under my feet is still some distance from the shore. During this distance, there happened to be a broken boat blocking their way. Hayden, A group of students, and teacher Zepha, heard the message from above. They couldn't help standing on the side of the deck and looking out to the sea in front. The warship deviated a little from the route, just enough to avoid the broken wooden boat. The small wooden boat floated to the side of their warship, hitting the hull from time to time with waves that were not very ups and downs. I took a closer look and noticed how pitiful this little broken ship is. Hey, there seems to be someone on the boat. They were all observing the small wooden boat, when a person suddenly pointed down and shouted. Others, including Hayden, couldn't help but take a closer look. Is there a person on the tattered boat who was blocked by a piece of tattered cloth, as if he had lost consciousness? Who will go down and save that person? Teacher Zepha shouted immediately. Immediately, one of them jumped off the warship and landed steadily on the ship below, and the small wooden ship shook violently. The man followed by grabbing the unconscious man on his shoulders, jumped directly, smashed the overwhelmed little broken ship, and jumped back onto the warship. Above, Zepha had already called the ship doctor who was accompanying him, and the man put the rescued person directly on the deck, and the ship doctor was here to give emergency treatment to the unconscious person. Advertisement. They and a group of Marines couldn't help forming a circle, and teacher Zepha looked at the unconscious person with no expression on his face. Hayden noticed that it was a man who had rescued him. Judging from his height and body muscles, this man should be a somewhat powerful person. It's just that, from the fact that he was wet by the sea and didn't know how the clothes were damaged, how did this person wear women's clothes? Moreover, the face was painted in fancy red and green, all of which were mixed on the face after being wet by the sea. What's the situation of this person? A big man was dressed up as a woman, which really puzzled Hayden. At this time, the ship doctor finished emergency treatment for this person. The person who had lost consciousness immediately moved his body, coughed out a few mouthfuls of seawater from his mouth, and opened his eyes. The sight of heads of different sizes around him staring at him, coupled with the trance he had just regained, made his mind a little confused. From the confusion revealed in his eyes, Hayden understood what was going on with him now. Hey buddy, what's your name? Tell me about your situation. Hayden stepped forward, swaying his right hand in front of his eyes twice and asking questions, and looked at him again. The other students around and teacher Zepha also waited for this person to speak. After hearing Hayden's question, the man didn't answer immediately. First, he looked at the surrounding environment left and right and noticed that he seemed to be still on the boat. He also noticed the uniforms worn by the people surrounding him at the moment. This group of people is the Navy. Am I on a Navy ship? Afterwards, the man slowly spoke. My name is Pele. I am the son of a king of a certain country, and I am here to take revenge. Chapter 37 Deep Hatred. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Revenge. When they heard the keyword uttered by the person who had been rescued, they were shocked in a circle. Teacher Zepha, who was on the same side, had different attentions in his mind. This person named Pele said that he is the son of the king of that country. Isn't he the son of the victim of the power of Queen Evakov of the kingdom of Kamabaka? Because the king turned into a ladyboy, which caused a political scandal, he was originally a royal family but lost his title because of this incident. What was supposed to be a good life was broken in an instant, so he came here to avenge himself, and to avenge his father. Zepha speculated from Belle's dressing up in women's costumes, plus a situation where he lost consciousness in the battle. Obviously, he couldn't finish it, and this set of women's dresses on him might still be the result of being defeated and caught. Zepha roughly speculated that the situation was similar to what Belle said next. Zepha stared at Belle in silence. Hayden and the others who surrounded Belle did not continue to interject. At this time, the memories that Belay wanted to bury in his heart gradually emerged. The expression on his face was very complicated. He clutched a blanket on his chest that a Marine soldier put on him, and his body trembled slightly due to the chill caused by the dampness. Then, he slowly told the experience of the previous few days. I am the son of the king of our country. Everyone calls me His Royal Highness Belle. I have a good life that I am very grateful for, but until the other day. My father, the king of the country, came to this island to visit the so-called Peach Paradise, in the kingdom of Kamabaka, and then, bad things happened. Advertisement. When Belle said this, he couldn't help but choked up, with painful memories flashing across his face. My father was turned into, become, by their king. Hayden looked at the person in front of him, his body shaking more violently. His expression immediately became savage, as if he thought of some great pain in his mind, and he couldn't speak completely. But what has become of that king? Hayden couldn't help thinking in his heart, but did not ask. Just listened to Pele and then said, "Since then, our family has been expelled from other people in our country, our house, our home. Even walking on the street, anyone is laughing at us wantonly." Bell's hands holding the blanket on his chest were clenched into fists. The hatred he had experienced caused him to pierce his fingernails into his palms. Blood slowly flowed from between his fingers, his eyes burning with anger. I didn't care about this little bit of pain. I'm not reconciled to this, so I came here to prepare for revenge, and the result. The result. The sight that seemed more terrifying than hell suddenly popped up in Bailey's mind, making him afraid to think about it, so he stopped talking and curled up subconsciously. Then, the way everyone looked at him, it didn't seem like he still wanted to speak. Hayden stood up. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. As a result, the people who had surrounded Bell dispersed. The ship doctor then helped Bell slowly stand up and walk towards the infirmary on the warship. Everyone in the elite camp, look at me, I look at you, and finally look at teacher Zepha. After hearing what happened to Pele, they didn't know what to think, they had their own ideas. As for Hayden, he still didn't understand what Bailey was talking about becoming that. He was curious as if there was a thorn stuck in his throat, feeling awkward. Teacher Zepha, who was standing in front of them, stood there with her chest in silence, and then slowly said, "Continue to set off." Immediately afterwards, the warship that had stopped temporarily because of saving people continued to head towards Peach Paradise. Advertisement. The short distance did not take much time at the speed of the warship. As the ship underfoot gets closer and closer to this heart-shaped island, Hayden stands on the side of the ship and looks forward. I noticed that the sea near this pink island seemed to be tinged with pink, and there was some strange flying fish jumping out of the sea, and it was the same pink flying fish that brought dazzling splashes. Just now, after listening to the low mood caused by the bad things that rescued the man, Hayden would once again be attracted by the strange scenery of this island, and his mood became lighter without knowing it. The warship was only a short distance away from the shore where it was anchored, and then a picture of a beautiful woman appeared in Hayden's sight, which made him feel happy. In the blurry scene, their warship was about to anchor on the coast, and there was 1, 2, 3. Hayden's countless figures for a time. From the curved curve of the figure, the countless figures are clearly countless beauties. As warships are getting closer, Hayden can notice more and more information. That figure may be tall, or lowly is short and cute, with long red hair, short pink hair, wavy blonde, all kinds of them. Hayden can't help but remember how many. Line up. Gather. Teacher Zepha issued an order at this time. Hayden immediately returned to his soul and ran to the team, standing straight and lining up. The 10 people selected beforehand stood in a row on the front deck of the warship. Zepha stood facing them and started the pre-task speech, telling them what to pay attention to next. Don't do anything extra after you get to the island, don't look at you, don't talk nonsense with your mouth. Keep calm when you encounter something. I hope there will be no fighting this time. I only need to take away the queen who committed the crime. The rest of the people don't need to care. The next thing you are going to encounter, you must keep calm. 10 people including Hayden nodded clearly. Advertisement. By the way, are Halushi handcuffs ready? Ready. One of them gestured by raising the Halushi handcuffs in his hands. At this time, the warship under our feet also steadily stopped on the coast of Peach Island, and the lower-level personnel on the warship had already set up the steps to disembark. And many more. Suddenly a voice rang behind them. Everyone immediately looked back and saw the person who had been rescued earlier, Belay. He was standing on the deck, as if he could blow down in just a breeze. Can I go with you? I know the road on this island, and I want to see that guy in handcuffs with my own eyes. In the infirmary, the ship doctor told him who General Zepha was. The general would definitely be able to catch his enemy, so he wanted to witness the scene with his own eyes. Zepha thought about it for a while after listening, and then agreed. Then, wearing a tailor-made exquisite purple suit, Zepha flicked the justice coat over him. Set off. Yes. 10 people including Hayden answered immediately. Hayden adjusted the sleeve bishwe on his left waist, and was the first to follow teacher Zepha and walk down the stairs. Then the other 9 people followed Hayden in an orderly manner. Although everyone wears a basic Navy uniform, this does not indicate the true strength of the 10 of them. Chapter 38 Real Daughter Island. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The shore of Peach Paradise. People on the island can see the incoming Navy ships from far away with their telescopes. At this time, a large group of people had been waiting for a long time on the coast. They gathered and stood at the place where the Navy ship was going to berth, standing next to each other in a line. The chain reaction brought about by the things that the queen of them did before, but I didn't expect the Navy to come so soon. However, they didn't have a hint of complaining about the queen. I just don't know if anyone who was going to inform the queen has arrived. With the first man on the warship stepping on the steps. The surrounding environment immediately became silent, and the surrounding atmosphere became heavy, as if the air was frozen. Seeing the people on the warship walk down, the silent crowd couldn't help but put their sights on the face of the leader. Purple hair, burly figure, and the Navy justice coat. That's right, that man is the Admiral of the Navy Black Wrist Zepha. Those who can receive news and newspapers know the origins of the people they will face next, the highest combat power of the Navy headquarters, also known as the highest combat power of the world government. One of the very few people in this ocean who cannot provoke an enemy. They did not expect that the consequences of this incident would attract the general's attention. Advertisement. They couldn't help but feel fear in their hearts at this moment. Next, the second Hayden also set foot on the steps to disembark. Looking high, Hayden swept the crowd on the left to the right as he walked. Hayden noticed a strange thing in his eyes, and an uncontrollable feeling suddenly appeared in his heart, and even the steps he took seemed to soften. Wait for me. The figure previously seen under the girl's pink filter that comes with this island, at this time, has narrowed the distance. Hayden can see clearly. The curved figure is not the kind of S-shaped bend that makes people feel reverie, but the kind of weird bend. The tall figure is not the kind of supermodel figure, but the tall one with a bamboo pole. As for Laurie's short cuteness, it's purely a fat circle. Red hair, pink hair, blonde hair, it's no different from that kind of inferior dyed hair. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. The most important thing is, all these beautiful beauties are men. Each body develops to extremes either longitudinally or horizontally. The face is bigger than a basketball, the cheekbones are oddly shaped, the chins are different, and the faces are beautiful. The hair is colorful, the face is covered with makeup without exception, the eye image is as if someone has been beaten, the beard is unshaven, and the lipstick is full. Some have their legs exposed in skirts and densely covered legs, and the whole body seems to retain the characteristics of a man. Another phenomenon is that it seems that they also brought the girly powder filter of the whole island, and the Buleinbulin was shining. In an instant, Hayden, who was autistic, cheered up and reluctantly set foot on this second daughter island, standing shivering beside teacher Zepha. Advertisement. However, the ladyboys who were still worried about the general just now noticed Hayden following the general. Handsome and straight figure, full chest, stiff arms, well-defined and deep facial features, as if the whole world is hidden in his eyes, and there is a domineering arrogance that scorns the world. Navy sweetheart. The emotions in the hearts of the demons suddenly surged, and their eyes suddenly glowed with strange sheen, unable to restrain the urge to move closer to Hayden. WDNMD. Recalling the warning from teacher Zepha before, he immediately noticed the light shining from the eyes of the demons around him, and Hayden, who was unwell, could only roar in his heart. He walked into the wolf pack unconsciously like a weak little sheep. This was not the reason for his strength, but an unspeakable feeling. Immediately afterwards, the 9 members of the team plus the previously rescued Pele, a total of 12 members stood on this peach-colored island. Zepha stood in the middle, Hayden stood on his left hand, and the others stood on the left and the right, all standing in place and making no move. Zepha looked around at the group of people blocking them. Teacher Zepha was also called the non-kill admiral, so he didn't intend to do it directly. He stared at the ladyboys in front of them blocking their way, and slowly said, "I'm waiting for your queen to have something to do. The rest are not within the scope of our mission. Please let the way out." The momentum of the admiral. The atmosphere of silence was first broken by Zepha, but their blocker at the moment did not want to speak. They just stared at each of them closely, and then slowly stepped aside and let them go. Zepha was not afraid of anything, and took the lead towards the island. Hayden hurriedly followed, but his eyes were gazing around with vigilance, and the various eyes around him made him very uncomfortable. Under the guidance of Bailey behind, slowly, a group of people stepped on the pink road and gradually penetrated into the island. Advertisement. The trees on the left and right sides of the forest are naturally pink. The island seems to be planted with cherry trees, and the air is filled with an elegant atmosphere. A sea breeze blows across the petals with takeoff dance, like a fairy flower. As the group walked, it seemed that no one was following them. At this time, Bedwell, who was following Hayden, began to behave. "Hey, Hayden, was it fun just now?" Bedwell lowered his voice and laughed, and he remembered the expression of Hayden he saw when he got off the boat just now, as if he had just eaten shit. Hayden had just eased from the previous encounter at this time, and heard that the dog was gloating after him, and he had clearly known the specific situation of the island a long time ago. His grandmother was a waste, but he didn't tell me. The thought of Hayden was furious. Immediately, Hayden paused slightly, waiting for the dog behind him to get closer to him, and Bedwell's body immediately pulled closer. Boom. Hayden grabbed the hilt of Shirayuki's knife with his left hand, lifted it up and pushed it directly back, and hit Bedwell's body without fail. Oh. Before the unsuspecting Bedwell had time to dodge, he took it firmly, bending backwards involuntarily, and subconsciously grasping his hands on Hayden's shoulders. As for the other companions behind them, they had become accustomed to the confrontation between the two of them, and they followed them and continued to move forward. Then Hayden flicked away Bedwell's hand that grabbed his shoulder, and walked forward like a okay person. Chapter 39 Embryo Evakov. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Hayden and a group of 12 people on the island walked through the Pink Girl Island. An animal figure that happened to flash across the woods was dressed in the same style as the ladyboys, as if wearing a wig, with heavy makeup. At this moment, Hayden couldn't help being alert to the potential dangers in the surrounding environment, and at the same time, he remembered the specific situation of this island from the memory in his mind. From the painting style of the island and the people on the island, as well as what happened to the previously rescued Bailey, the queen to be arrested, all kinds of nodes are connected together. Hayden remembered that this island should be the original, the land of that ladyboy king. His grandma is tall. The memory of this kind of plot is always less than 1 or 2 points, and then it cannot be put together into a complete plot, only when it touches it, and the shit hits the fan, can I remember it all. And the she-male king. Her full name is Embryo Evakov. She has excellent medical skills. She once rescued people who were diagnosed as incurable and close to death. She was also called the strongest she-male king in history, and secretly still a cadre of the Revolutionary Army. Most importantly, she is a capable person who has eaten the fruits of hormones. She can turn you from a male to a female, and a female to a male in just one shot. It is truly a terrifying skill. Hayden only thought about the result of the move in his mind, and didn't dare to think about it later. Looking at the back of Teacher Zepha in front of him, Hayden couldn't help thinking in his heart. Although Teacher Zepha's action was taken, there shouldn't be any difference in the task of imprisoning Evakov. Advertisement. And many more. Was Evakov caught this time into Push City? Can't think of any plot points about this mission. Suppose that the mission failed this time, and she did not capture her into Push City. Evakov was captured into Push City later, so what was the reason for the failure? Evakov's strength made her have no chance of winning against the general's strength Teacher Zepha. That is, let her entire staff deal with Zepha, plus the 10 of us did not have any chance of escape. So is this mission due to the butterfly effect caused by me who came through? There will still be an uninvited guy who will help her. Evakov is a cadre of the Revolutionary Army. Her boss is her boss, and the leader of the Revolutionary Army, Qu D. Long. This is still very mysterious in the original work until the latest update before he crosses. Character: Luffy's lousy, Carp's old man's son. I don't know his specific abilities or the exact geometry of his strength, but judging from the multiple identities he has revealed, his strength should be almost the same if he is not a general. Oops. Hayden couldn't help muttering to himself behind Zepha, but the expression on his face was not worried. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. At this time, above the countless canopies of the cherry blossom trees, a strange bird swept across the sky above Hayden and his party, with a flash of light on its chest. Hayden and the others didn't care about a bird flying by, and everyone walked out of the forest along the forest road and stepped onto the paved pink brick road on the island. In an instant, the ladyboys on the island suddenly showed their respective figures again, standing beside them staring at them. Naturally, these actions could not affect General Zepha, and his footsteps continued to move forward without stopping at all. The elite battalion students who followed were a bit of a stance. Although they were all laughing at Hayden before, they felt the same in their hearts. Advertisement. Afterwards, under the guidance of Bell, everyone came to the gate of a magnificent castle surrounded by forests 5 miles away. The castle is divided into several separate heart-shaped tower-top buildings connected to the main building in the center, and even the iron fence surrounding the castle is made into a heart-shaped style. At this moment, someone was already standing at the gate of the castle waiting for them. The man saw that a group of people in navy uniforms had arrived, and then opened the door and bent over to signal them to come in. Then, regardless of whether they were following or not, he first walked towards the castle to lead them. Hey, the queen is waiting for us. Zepha chuckled slightly. She didn't expect that she would dare to do this when the navy came after she knew she had committed the matter. Then Zepha walked in with the person in front, and Hayden and others behind him followed him. The queen's castle has a huge internal space. After walking behind the guide for a while, Hayden and his team finally came to the hall where the queen is located in the castle. They finally saw the only target of the mission, the queen of the kingdom of Kamabaka Ambryo Evakov. The interior decoration of the queen's hall is extremely exaggerated. There are crystal headlights hanging down from the towering dome, several large paintings are hung on the surrounding walls, and an unknown number of steps are raised in the middle to reach the queen's throne. And Evakov is sitting on the throne. He wears a deep purple explosive hair that is huge enough to be Tibetan, long and dense eyelashes, flamboyant eye shadow, and purple lip gloss. The clothes are clothes that Hayden can't bear to look directly at: mesh black fishnet socks, tight-fitting low-cut jumpsuits, topless and open back. Advertisement. Finally, there is her body shape. Sitting in the seat, Hayden visually measured her to be much taller than Teacher Zepha, and she was also an abnormal height in a typical pirate's worldview. It's okay if you're watching an animation, but Hayden is watching the live-action version now. This picture is really spicy, his eyes are not good. Then Evakov on the throne looked at them with a smile on their faces and spoke. Welcome Admiral Zepha to come here as a guest, Evakov said in her unique voice. May I ask if Admiral Zepha is here with the candy boys behind him? While she was speaking, her gaze swept over Hayden and others behind Zepha, paused for a moment on the face of Bailey at the end, a little surprised, and stayed on Hayden's face again for a long time. Queen of the Kingdom of Kamabaka, Ambryo Evakov. Zepha didn't intend to gossip and went straight to the point, continuing in a low voice. Because of what you have done before, for the safety of your subordinates, please don't resist, just let me wait for you to handcuff you, and then I will take you to Advance City. Why do you think I will follow you obediently? The condescending Evakov replied with a smile. You didn't do anything evil before, so the Navy didn't want to take care of your island, but now that you have committed a crime, please be honest with you and put on handcuffs. Zepha paused for a second when he said this, and then continued with a threatening tone. If not, then I will be your opponent. Quote. Evakov fell silent after listening. Chapter 40 Death Winks. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Zepha's motioned to the students behind with the Halu stone handcuffs to come forward. The student holding the handcuffs stood with Zepha. As for Hayden behind, he couldn't help putting his right hand on the handle of Shu Baishui's knife in advance, ready for any emergencies at any time. Hayden didn't think that the previous Ladyboy King, who was a cadre of the Revolutionary Army, would just ask teacher Zepha to handcuff her. At this time, apart from Hayden and a dozen of them in the hall, only Evakov was on the side of the Monster King. However, in Hayden's perception of reinforcement, behind the walls around the hall, Ivankov's subordinates are already piled up. Judging from the strength of reinforcement, their strength does not have any effect, but their number is still there dozens of times more than a dozen. Under the current circumstances, Hayden has no intention of telling teacher Zepha about the situation behind the wall for the time being. It's not that Hayden is afraid or has something. It's because he has lost hope, hoping that Evakov will be so honest, otherwise the two sides will fight. He doesn't want his sleeve bishwe slashed on them, let alone touch them with his body. As for the setting that the Ladyboy King in One Piece's main plot is a good one, teacher Zepha adheres to the principle of not killing, and the other 9 people do not have that extreme idea, and basically no casualties will occur. There will be no great grievances with the Revolutionary Army in the future, and there shouldn't be any major problems with their help in the future. Okay, I'll follow you. After listening to the warning from General Zepha, Evakov showed a very low mood on his face. From the glamorous appearance to a lifeless appearance, he consciously folded his hands together and stepped down the stairs slowly. At this moment this scene. The last of Hayden's team, Belay, saw Evakov in his eyes and caught it by himself. His eyes were full of excitement, and his emotions were mixed. Advertisement. Unexpectedly, under the general's presence, she would be arrested in such a simple way. The revenge of the father and the family can be revenge, so that the father can return to the original state. Belle's excitement was hard to tell, and there were some tears in his smile. And Hayden in front of the team saw Evakov come directly down like this, making him look startled, and the shemales behind the surrounding walls in the perception of Reiki did not withdraw. There is something wrong, something very wrong. The atmosphere in the air followed Evakov stepping down the stairs step by step, and the atmosphere dropped sharply. Hayden could already smell the special perfume sprayed on Evakov's body. Hayden gripped the handle of the knife with his right hand and immediately squeezed, ready to release the knife immediately to prevent accidents. At the same time, Bedwell, who was standing next to Hayden, also noticed the aura that Hayden exudes at this time. This feeling reminded him of the feeling that he had exuded at the moment before each crisis occurred in this year. Bedwell also placed his right hand on the narrow and straight tang sword hilt behind him. His eyes watched around him, and his main focus was on the Ladyboy King that teacher Zepha was about to touch. Please don't hurt my sweets from now on. Above 4 meters, the depressed Evakov said, sobbing and sobbing. At this time, he was standing in front of General Zepha. The companion in handcuffs looked at the Ladyboy Queen standing in front of her at the moment. She was so taller than himself that he didn't know where he was. He had to look up to see her face. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi, then he couldn't help looking at teacher Zepha. Was he handcuffed directly, or what? He was very tangled at the moment. Teacher Zepha didn't speak, and nodded towards him. Then the guy with the handcuffs thought about it and prepared to jump up and handcuff the Ladyboy Queen. However, at this time, suddenly, just as Hayden expected, the terrible result. Death winks. Advertisement. With long eyelashes, the big eyes with eyeshadow blinked sharply. In an instant, a high-speed and invisible blast came out of Evakov's face. Spread. In order to prevent the students behind him from being injured, Zepha immediately armed his domineering covering arms to block him in front of him, and stubbornly caught the move, and the effect of the explosion immediately enveloped him. Huh, I lied to you. Evakov immediately flashed back to the throne with a flash. The smile on his face couldn't close his mouth. What? It turned out to be a lie to them. A bang immediately came in from outside the wall. Draw a knife and chop. In the blink of an eye after the explosion, Hayden had switched to a position where there were no obstacles in the middle of Evakov and swung a flying slash. The invisible sword aura instantly slashed towards Evakov's chest. Call out. Evakov's figure dodged before the last moment the slash touched her skin, but the throne behind her was not spared. The diagonal incision was neat and smooth, and it slowly slipped towards the ground, sending out a stone crack sound. Ha, ha, ha. Previously, due to Evakov's sudden action, the other students reacted quickly and moved away from her attack line. At this time, the figure moving back at high speed also appeared. At this time, the hall returned to the abnormal quiet before. Teacher Zepha, who was enveloped in the smoke and dust of the explosion, gradually appeared, and his sleeves were blown up by the explosion, revealing her shiny dark arms. These arms were Zepha's famous weapon. Advertisement. Except for the damage caused by the explosion of his clothes, Zepha didn't have any wounds on his body, so he stood in place. Hayden was standing in his right-hand position, Bedwell was standing in his left-hand position, and the rest of the people formed an enveloping formation to block every exit. As for Pele, he had found a corner to hide. Oh, it's so dangerous, I didn't expect Navy Candy to be so powerful. Evakov wiped away the non-existent cold sweat on his forehead, and said in Hayden's direction. Hayden did not respond. HMPH, your power is pretty good, but are you sure this is the answer you gave? Zepha snorted and wanted to give her another chance to choose. Of course, I am the queen of the Kamabaka kingdom, the head of Kamabaka's new shemale boxing technique, how can I go with your navy like this? Evakov put on a pose immediately after speaking. You are far from my opponent, and it's no harm to you. Evakov had no intention of surrendering. He clapped his hands and laughed and shouted. Ha ha ha, candies, come out. Bang, bang, bang. The new ladyboys behind the surrounding walls all kicked the wall and swarmed into the hall. From the head, from the left, from the right, there were people coming from all directions. The movement created suddenly made smoke billow in the hall, and there was nothing in sight. Back. Zepha immediately gave Hayden and the others an order to withdraw from the hall. Chapter 41. All feet are sent together. Recommendation ticket collection. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Sudden attacks came towards Hayden and them from all directions, and the scene in the Queen's Hall suddenly became worse. The wall was kicked to pieces and turned into huge stones, one by one, flying one by one, which was mixed with kicks from some new monsters, like a dense firepower net covering them. Seeing the situation at this moment, Zepha immediately responded, and immediately ordered Dao Hayden to withdraw from the hall. Under the effect of one of the 6 transcendent navy shaves, they instantly retreated from the encirclement net. At the same time, they also brought Pele, who had no effect at this time, and everyone was not affected by the new ladyboys' attacks. But then immediately, at this time, standing on the spacious walkway outside the hall, they noticed that cracks appeared on the wall in front of them, slowly extending to the top, and then turning into huge cracks. The entire wall began to crack, and the exit gate they had just come out had already collapsed on the floor with a thud. The sudden attack made by the new ladyboys immediately caused the main body of the entire Queen's Hall to collapse. But fortunately, the main body of the castle was not affected much. The walkway where Hayden and the others stood at this time was still intact, except for some smoke and dust rising under the violent vibration. At this time, a huge wide space just appeared inside the castle. Hayden was standing on the spacious walkway outside, staring at the smoke and dust that had not yet dispersed in front of him, very vigilant about the situation in the dense smoke. Even if Zepha didn't need to see the color domineering to perceive the situation in the hall at this time, even if there were a few Hayden who hadn't learned the view and color, or even just a Bell who led the way. They all understand the same thing. At this moment, their numbers are not dominant, and it is impossible for these ladyboys to be resolved just because of the collapse of the room. Advertisement. Bang, bang, bang. Immediately, from the thick smoke and dust that had not yet dispersed, chunks of huge wall rubble whizzed towards the shemales under their powerful legs. Landfoot. Zepha didn't panic at all, and calmly gave an order, standing in place with his chest folded. Immediately afterwards, 10 people, including Hayden and Bedwell, used their own flesh and blood to kick out super fast and powerful kicks with their own legs, and rolled up the vacuum to create swordsmanship. The flying slash that slashed out. With terrifying vacuum slashes, the invisible air wave kicked out by 10 people within a few seconds immediately covered the entire area in front of them, aiming to accurately meet every piece of rubble. In an instant, countless broken stones turned into tiny stones, floating down to the floor. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Swish. 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 There was a loud noise. Immediately afterwards, from the thick smoke, countless new shemales suddenly appeared, each with weird shapes and different strengths, standing in a row facing Hayden and the others. At this time, the billowing smoke and dust produced by the collapse of the Queen's hull was also dissipated because of the momentum created by the several feet and the new ladyboys. At this moment, everyone in this castle can see each other clearly. Ivankov stood in the middle of the new ladyboys, her queen's right hand Caroline stood on the right hand side, and at the same time was the successor of the new ladyboy boxing method. They were surrounded by densely packed new ladyboys in the middle. Hayden's side is also in the same position. Everyone has found an opponent to face next. Advertisement. Zepha will naturally face Evakov next, and Hayden intends to face Carolyn, who is second only to the monster king Evakov in his perception of Reiki. As for the rest of Bedwell and others, only a group of new ladyboys were left to confront them, and at the same time they stopped them from disturbing teacher Zepha. At this moment, it is the king, against the generals, against a large group of soldiers. Zepha slightly squinted his eyes and stared at the ladyboy king Evakov in front of him. At this time, he had no intention of continuing to communicate after the ladyboy side just started to communicate, and he directly knocked her out and took him away. Face the enemy. Zepha simply uttered 2 words, and under the action of an explosive force, he smashed the floor tiles under his feet and headed straight towards the monster king. On the road, there are actually a few human monster soldiers who want to block Zepha's offensive. In Hayden's line of sight, their poor body only acts like a pebble on the road, and they are swept away under the momentum generated by teacher Zepha's charge go to the side without having to do anything. Afterwards, Evakov watched the attacking Zepha immediately shifted his position, and moved at high speed to change his position. The figure flashed around, and the iron fist thrown by teacher Zepha instantly smashed into the ground. Knowing in his mind that he cannot choose a head-to-head approach with Zepha, who has the strength of a general, Evakov can only rely on his hormones to increase the pace of his footsteps to turn around and dodge Zepha. At this moment, Evakov has only one goal, as long as he persists for a while, so in order to delay time, Evakov directly flashed out of this huge space. And Zepha never stopped pursuing, although he immediately understood that this was some kind of strategy of Evakov. Maybe it was not necessarily to mobilize him, but there was no idea in his heart to stop. If it is to mobilize me to deal with my students, then your abacus is simply wrong. Hayden and the others are not a good deal. Seeing Evakov, who was everywhere in the aisle in front of him at this moment, Zepha couldn't help thinking in his heart. Advertisement. ... And similarly, when the hall collapsed, the she-males had already discussed the next countermeasures, as long as everyone delayed a little time, even if it was only a minute and a second longer. At this time, watching the figure of Lord Eva and the general going further and further away, Carolyn, one of the crowd of monsters in front of him, said, "I am the right hand of the queen of the kingdom of Kamabaka, Kamabaka. The right hand of the heir to the authentic new she-male boxing technique." At this time, because the Queen Evakov was still there, Carolyn did not have the title of agent. With long red hair, a purple dress, pure white knee socks, and a pair of black high heels, her face naturally goes without saying. "Candy boys, only you and us are left now. This is really good," she said with a wink in the direction of Hayden. Without the oppressive force that General Zepha and Lord Eva gave them, a group of murlocs suddenly began to wink at Hayden and the others, or shouted like a star chaser. Quote. X11. Seeing the movements of the ladyboys in front of him, Hayden was utterly fussy, his face twitched a little, and even his right hand holding the knife trembled a little. Bedwell and others next to him also looked a bit unbearable. Bedwell hurriedly said to Hayden, "Hayden, since she is the queen's right hand, then her strength must be lower than the queen. You are the most powerful among us, so leave it to you." The other companions nodded quickly in agreement. Chapter 42:30 of the Road. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. "You don't need to say, I will find her too," Hayden immediately replied to a group of dogs as he looked at the eager monsters in front of him. You won't be her opponent based on your strength." Then he replied, "Ha ha 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 ha." Teacher Zepha was not by their side, which also meant that they could let go of them and began to talk to Hayden with a relaxed expression. According to the strength that the opponents have just shown, compared with the 10 of them, the gap between them cannot be made up only by the suppression of numbers. So they looked at the new ladyboys in front of them casually, but the strange eyes of the new ladyboys staring at them made them very uncomfortable. Neither physical strength nor spiritual pressure was consumed much. Hayden wanted to quickly and directly solve the opposite Caroline. Staring into Caroline's eyes, his left hand brushed Shirayuki's blade. Ling Wu. Hiss. The biting frost instantly covered Shu Baishui's previously indifferent blade, and Shu Baishui was exuding a deep cold that was unbearable for ordinary people. I'm on it first. After talking to Bedwell and others next to him, Hayden rushed directly. Hayden is still cool. Bedwell and others beside him sighed unanimously, and nodded involuntarily every time they saw Hayden's ability. The abilities of Lieutenant General Kuzan's frozen element, plus that he himself has entered the realm of a swordsman, the combined strength of the two abilities cannot be underestimated. Hayden, who had already learned the instant step, was shining in this space at this moment, preventing the Caroline he was looking for from catching it. Advertisement. Fast speed. Caroline couldn't help muttering while looking at the incoming Navy sweetheart. But I'm not bad, Navy sweetheart. After Caroline finished speaking to herself, immediately rushed towards Hayden, who she noticed in her eyes, and her body disappeared in place at the same time. Hayden, who was in the air, immediately noticed the disappearance of Caroline on the ground, and when she fixed her eyes, she actually attacked herself. Hayden chuckled, and the spiritual pressure of his right arm instantly poured onto the tip of Shirayuki's knife, enhancing the power of freezing, and swung towards the insightful Caroline figure. Half Moon Ice. Suddenly, Shu Baishui cut out a hitman's sword aura and flew over in midair. There was a freezing chill in the air where the sword aura passed, and the temperature in the midair was lowered by Hayden in an instant. New shemale boxing technique, beauty spin. Facing the face of the sword, Caroline immediately used the dodge trick of rotating his body, and the whole figure in the air seemed to be turned into a top, just passing the Hittite attack. Sword chi passed by, but the chill let Caroline understand a truth: if this move hits her, the consequences will be very bad. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Can't hard wire. Caroline didn't intend to continue to rush to Hayden's body to attack, and then retreated back to the ground. Oh, you are wise. Hayden didn't condense the spirit in the atmosphere to let him stand in the air, but stepped out of the moon step to hang in the air, looking down at Caroline, who had returned to the ground at this time. Hey, or else you just give up. Okay, we won't hit you, and see what happens when they come back. Hayden kindly persuaded Caroline. Although he didn't want to hurt them, he couldn't stand it if he really got angry after he waited. At the same time, advertisement. Bedwell and others also confronted the minions below. Each can be said to be responding to the attacks of more than a dozen celebrities at the same time, but this did not help. Paper painting dodges attacks, shaves to increase mobility, iron defenses, and landslides to release long-range attacks. The proficient Navy 6 types and the special abilities that each person has trained allow them to easily deal with every attack. For a time, the situation on the court immediately fell towards Hayden. The new ladyboys can't contend at all. Bedwell and the others are simple and neat with one move. The new ladyboys can only rely on their numbers to pile up and delay time. Candy boy, that's not what I want. I won't let you help your boss deal with our Lady Queen. Caroline refused without thinking. She wouldn't believe what the Navy said. Hayden had no thoughts after hearing it, and shrugged and said, well, it's up to you. His expression didn't matter, and then he immediately chanted a spell. The 30-bound Dao, the mouth flashes 3 times. His left hand drew a triangle pattern in front of him, and the time of Lynxie's ascending time in Hayden's left hand converged into 3 connected yellow-pointed beams. The beam emitted a huge roar and shot directly at Caroline's body, stuck her hands and waist on the wall far away from where she was standing, unable to move. What is this? Caroline watched the release of the Navy sweetheart in front of him at this moment and was at a loss for attacks of completely different attributes. Shouldn't the Devil Fruit ability use a completely different type of ability? Frozen type and this suspected light type special ability, did he eat 2 devil fruits? No. At this moment, Caroline couldn't understand what Hayden had done just now. Hayden didn't continue to make moves, and controlled her with the Dao Dao. If he cut her again, he was afraid that this person would be gone. If she breaks free from this level of restraint, then give her a high-level restraint to control it. Advertisement. However, Hayden hadn't finished thinking about it, and Caroline broke his bondage 30. Huh. Dot huh. Dot huh. Huh. Dot huh. Caroline couldn't breathe because of being stuck, staring at Hayden, who was still beating in the air, and she couldn't help but feel a certain sense of fear. The leisurely and contented every move, the ability of the freezing element, the ability of flying and slashing, the ability of the suspected light element, the strength displayed by a variety of means, made Caroline dare not act rashly. At this time, Bedwell below came across a team of strange flowers. "We are the 4 she-males under Lord Queen. Quote dot dot dot. The 4 she-males under Lord Queen. Quote dot dot dot. The 4 great she-males under Lord Wong. Quote dot dot dot. The 4 great she-males." The combination of 5 people in total issued an uncoordinated slogan, and the 5 she-males put on an extremely exaggerated posture on the spot. And many more. Bedwell was a little stunned with the tang knife in his hand, waved to them to pause. He pointed to the monster in front of him and counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. "Aren't you 4 big ladyboys?" Bedwell yelled immediately after reacting. Yes, we are the 4 big she-males." After speaking, the 5 people reproduced the posture they had just posed again. Chapter 43 King Longwong, Recommendation Ticket Collection. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. This Tang sword is called the Great King Dragon and Phoenix. The knife is 70 centimeters long and has a narrow and straight blade. A blood-red phoenix pattern is flying on the handle. A 5-clawed red dragon walks on the blade. The body is dark red. This is a weapon that Bedwell specially sought out craftsman custom-made under Hayden's suggestion. Under the sun's rays, the blade will change to another color. At this moment, Bedwell, holding a knife, looked at the big 4 she-males in front of him and didn't know what to do. A black line appeared on his forehead. Quote dot 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 quote. "Candy boy, we won't let you pass." The 4 big ladyboys did not speak uniformly again, as if everyone's network latency was different, but they themselves didn't seem to realize it. This scene caused a question mark to appear in Bedwell's mind, and he didn't want to go over it, but the operation of the 5 she-males on the opposite side made him incomprehensible. It is also because of the not to kill concept taught to them by Zepha. At this time, Bedwell was thinking about how to stun them when he waited, so as not to kill them directly. However, 5 of the 4 big she-males suddenly shot at Bedwell. Quote dot dot dot. Advertisement. The 5 men rushed over to occupy all possible routes in front of Bedwell, and they blocked it tightly. The 4 big ladyboys slammed into the air halfway through the run. Everyone stretched their arms exaggeratedly, bent their left leg, straightened their right leg, and kicked at Bedwell's body diagonally. New she-male boxing technique, the 13th beauty flying kick. Quote dot dot dot. New she-male boxing technique, the 13th beauty flying kick. But Bedwell still looked relaxed just now. The Great King Dragon Phoenix was taken into the scabbard on his waist at this time, and then he pulled it out again. Even the scabbard was pulled out by him to take it in. On hand. At this time, his nose could already smell the perfume of the 4 monsters who attacked him, and he moved his nose, making it a little itchy. The 4 major she-males flying kick attack route in midair blocked Bedwell's entire body, and the heels of the high-heeled shoes were about to touch his face. Blink. With the Great King Dragon Phoenix retracted in the scabbard, Bedwell moved. The concept of time has been suspended by him in his consciousness. The upper body leaned back slightly, avoiding the first kick, and then his left hand grabbed the hairy leg that passed by, and then flung it to the person who came in the second kick. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. After that, he immediately blocked the King's Dragon and Phoenix scabbard with his right hand on the top of his head, and steadily caught the attack from the top of the head. With the force of hitting the scabbard, his arm swayed slightly, controlling the flow of power and taking advantage of the attack to the side. Following him, the Great King Longwong, who was holding it up high, thrust directly behind him, making a bang. In the end, Bedwell squatted directly, avoiding the last kick. Boom. 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 The 4 major shemale combinations were all defeated and collapsed on the gravel-filled floor near Bedwell. It's just a moment's matter. Advertisement. At the same time, a total of 5 attacks came from 5 different angles, but Bedwell disintegrated easily, and even the range of his footsteps did not exceed the 1-meter diameter circle around him. The gap between the strengths of the two sides seemed so clear and ruthless at this moment. Bedelvin couldn't help rubbing his clothes with his left hand, recalling the texture of the hairy legs he had just touched. He couldn't help asking himself, why I thought of picking up their bodies with my hands just now, and I regretted it for a second. Enduring a little awkwardness, Bedwell then pinned the King Longwong back to his waist. Hayden in the sky had the first-class seat of the round just now. He looked down in midair without a clear view, and he could see more than 3,000 details of Bedwell in just 1 second. I haven't seen Bedwell take a shot in recent missions, but he has made a lot of progress. Awesome, Beckham. Hayden joked and applauded Bedwell. It seems that I have made a lot of progress under my practice. Babe, Abba is very optimistic about you. Blindfold bastard. Hearing Hayden's yin and yang talking weirdly, and looking up at Hayden's Bedwell, he already knew what Hayden really meant by this situation, and muttered. Immediately, his right hand drew a knife quickly to cut out a slash to the sky Hayden. Ouch. The speed of the slash was not much, and Hayden dodged slightly. After losing the target, the flying slash always flew to the ceiling, and even though its power was reduced, it still stuck straight into the thick wall, leaving a not-so-shallow gully. Hayden adjusted the blindfold on his forehead a bit, then took off the navy cap from his head, revealing a thick, dark back head, the length of which was just left at the back of his neck. You idiot, you almost messed up my hairstyle. Hayden immediately yelled at Bedwell below. Advertisement. Bedwell didn't care. Shrugging his shoulders did not matter, who cares about you? At this moment, he seems to have forgotten the days when Hayden was spurred by Hayden. He realized that his strength had broken through recently, and Bedwell was a bit swollen. As if they were on their own territory, the two began to quarrel with each other, ignoring that there were many new ladyboys around. But it doesn't matter, the remaining elite camp students, their 2 companions are still working hard to clean up the remaining new shemales one by one. This kind of small scene did not inform the waiting personnel on the warship to come here to support, the situation is under their control. However, Carolyn, who had broken free of Hayden's 30th road before, took advantage of Hayden and his companions to distract attention. Carolyn also took the opportunity to recover his strength and think about countermeasures. The opponent has a strong long-range attack method and a variety of abilities, but he is only good at close combat methods. In addition, there is only the new shemale fist method, Girl's Awakening. He implanted a girl's heart. At this moment, just as Hayden was not paying attention to her, Carolyn used all his strength to start suddenly, and the high heels worn under her feet stepped on the floor and made a very fast clatter. It flashed below Hayden in an instant. Boom. Taking off with both feet, his body immediately jumped up, just at the same height as Hayden at this time, and flashed in front of him. I lost. A big face suddenly appeared in front of him. The whole Hayden hurriedly changed his position. It was like a bridge in a horror game just now, without warning. The frightened Hayden flashed to the ground, and his little hands could not help stroking the injured little heart. His grandma is big. 15%. Chapter 44 First Dance Yubai Recommendation Ticket for Collection. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Memories of playing horror games in the world in the past have risen like a tide. Hayden couldn't help swallowing his saliva, and then realized that the big face just now was Carolyn that he had forgotten before. He didn't expect that she would even dare to rush to get closer to him. Didn't he know that Zhanao's power would be even greater in the close range? But this shock did not last for a few seconds on Hayden. It was too late, and Carolyn, who was still in midair for the last second, had also fallen down, and immediately followed Hayden with a set of combos. New Shemale Fist FAUI, Awakening of the Girl. The beauty of the new Shemale boxing 44 inches. Dream Strikes Punch. Carolyn combined the 2 profound meanings of the new Shemale boxing technique. With both hands in the shape of a sword, he stabs Hayden at a super high speed. This is the profound meaning of the boxing technique she only learned from the queen not long ago, and it is also the most powerful trick she can use now. The girl's awakening is coupled with the ultra-high-speed hand knife. As long as she can keep rubbing against Shanghai Deng's body, then the girl's awakening will play its role. In an instant, Hayden immediately realized the extraordinary significance of this profound meaning. The speed of Caroline's moves was increased several times faster than before, and the power of the attack was estimated to have increased a lot. Hayden's footsteps kept changing, his eyes were staring at each of Caroline's shots. Caroline's stabbing fist wind constantly brushed his body, and Hayden just used his sleeve to block all the attacks on the vital points. But inevitably, other attacks on the body left some small scratches, but it was not a major problem. Gradually, Caroline's tricks seemed endless, and Hayden became impatient. At this time, a strange thought appeared in Hayden's heart, and his evasive movements slowly became twisted, as if something invisible was binding his hands and feet. Advertisement. At the same time, he also noticed why Caroline's face seemed to be getting more and more happier now, and why was she still laughing? Didn't you see her uprising without hitting it? However, Huo said. The stiff Hayden made a careless move, and Caroline caught a gap in his dodge. Caroline stopped the attack immediately, grabbed Hayden with his arms wide open. What happened? How come that disgusting feeling is gone? The face of Hayden, who was held in his arms, seemed to be blushed immediately, and he was very shy in his heart. Etc. Candy boy, you will live with us from now on. Caroline looked down at Hayden in his arms and said softly, eyes shining with excitement. Then there seemed to be an inexplicable coldness in Hayden's heart, and he immediately realized that Caroline felt something wrong with him. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Under the inexplicable stimulus from the bottom of his heart, Hayden's sanity returned to his brain in an instant. The tightly held body fell into a strange state of weakness, and it seemed that only the beginning of the solution could restore him to a normal state. It's just that I didn't expect to use Hajijia for the last trash fish. After sighing, Hayden silently read the original explanation. Ling Wu, Shu Baishui. Boom. A pure white column 4 or 5 meters high suddenly burst out of Hayden's body. Advertisement. Hayden's body immediately gained the ability to move, and he immediately broke away from Caroline's arms, and as he withdrew back, he released the initial solution. The ribbon flew, and as he stepped back, Hayden waved lightly into the void in front of Carolyn. Chuo Wu, Yubai. On the ground on which Carol was standing at this time, a white circle suddenly appeared, and she was shrouded in it. What? The cold that could penetrate into the bone marrow passed to her under her feet made Caroline a little panicked. Then before she waited for what she wanted to do, ice cubes slowly overflowed from the pure white ground under her feet, and slowly along her toes, it froze until she reached her chest. However, by the time she realized this, it was already too late. Even if she realized that she had broken the ice block that had frozen her lower body and wanted to hide in the air, it would be in vain. Within the circle drawn by Hayden Su Baishui, both the ground and the sky are within the frozen area of Su Baishui. At this moment, the icicles had reached the ceiling. Standing in front of the icicles, watching Caroline, whose expression was frozen in horror in the ice, Hayden silently stopped Moonwhite's continuation. For a while, the temperature in the space of this huge castle was artificially lowered by Hayden. This seems to be more shocking than the nature of ice and snow, and all the people around who are still in the fighting can't help but stop. The tall and sturdy icicles exuded bursts of frightening aura that everyone around could not ignore, and the air exhaled from the nose seemed to be frozen. Serious, Hayden is really scary. It really deserves to be called a naval supernova. The other 8 people couldn't help but sighed as they watched this scene before them, recalling the last time Hayden was serious. Advertisement. Bedwell, who held his arms around his chest, just snorted coldly. Can this be done by humans? There are such powerful people in this group of Navy wearing inferior uniforms. This is even more powerful than Our Lady Queen. The stunned new ladyboys couldn't help thinking about this in their hearts, and couldn't help but express their thoughts. However, Hayden controlled the intensity of the release of Yubai, maintaining it at a level that was just enough to freeze her from breaking out, and not to freeze her directly. At the same time, he solved the opponent with just one trick. Hayden felt that you just couldn't do it with just a little bit of force. Then he thought of itchy hands, and turned his head around to find the next one being chopped object. Only at this time, the new ladyboys around were almost cleaned up by his companions. When he was looking for it, the surrounding new ladyboys had been completely cleaned up, lying on the floor nearby in densely packed piles. All of them fell into a coma. No, Hayden complained immediately with the cold-sleeved sleeve baishui in his hand. He then looked at the only people standing on the surrounding field. These people were his companions, 9 people including Bedwell. Immediately, everyone looked at each other and slowly approached Hayden to gather. At this moment, it was the huge space vacated after the hall collapsed, and it was already a dilapidated and improper room. This would make the surrounding situation worse after the battle between the two sides ended. Before Hayden could speak, the 10 of them heard a sound in their ears at the same time. With the shaking of the castle wall, some sand and stones fell on the floor. Immediately, everyone knew what was going on without guessing. They thought of a person at the same time. Chapter 45 Demolition completed. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Ivankov. The entire right hand spreading to the shoulder was wrapped in high-level armed domineering, shining with eye-catching black light, and the chasing Zepha would smash a thick wall in the castle with one punch. As if a fist had 1,000 tons of power, nothing could stop Zepha's fist, smashing everything that came into contact with his fist in the castle. The pursued Ivankov can only rely on her familiarity with the interior of the castle to avoid the attack of General Zepha in embarrassment. The two dashed around in the interior of the castle. At this time, the place they passed was a mess, the walls, the ground, and even the ceiling above their heads. Not to mention the things directly touched by Zepha's fist, even the wind of his fist can destroy everything. The entire castle, which is large and intact, became as if it had been demolished in just 10 minutes, and the two people caused uninterrupted shaking of the earth. However, at this time, Ivankov, who just broke out to escape Zepha's attack, had almost exhausted her energy at this moment. Under the pressure of the general's pursuit, her energy was consumed faster than usual. On a large scale. Boom boom boom. Zepha punched and kicked as if all the tofu was hit. The young castle can no longer withstand the torture of 2 older men. Every move and style that Zepha wields is extremely tormenting for it, and it was squeezed out by these 2 people from a vigorous state. Boom. The castle could no longer bear it, and ended its short life. Advertisement. The castle collapsed from the top dome, revealing a skylight, and the night sky came through. Time has come tonight without knowing it. Immediately afterwards, a chain reaction appeared from the collapsed dome, 1 piece, 2 pieces. The huge roof, which was as heavy as a formidable weight, all collapsed, and along with countless small pieces of rubble, the interior of the castle was immediately plunged into smoke and dust. Withdraw from the castle. Hayden, who was still at the original site of the Queen's Hall, saw this scene and quickly ordered the others to be signaled. Bedwell and the others, who also understood the current situation, did not talk nonsense. They took the almost forgotten Pele, and stepped on the moon step to jump out of the falling boulders. The dust from the collapse of this huge castle went straight into the sky. Hayden and the others stepped out of the castle on the moon and did not stay in the air at once. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. The appearance of the castle was concealed by the heavy sand. Hayden and the others had already retreated to the edge of the pink forest farthest from the castle, but the air waves caused by the collapse still spread to the edge of the forest where they were at the moment. Suddenly, the forest made a rushing sound. Afterwards, Hayden and others saw a slightly discordant spectacle. The air wave shook the countless pink petals on the forest trees, floating in midair between their fingers. Against the backdrop of the night, the petals seemed to be shining with a light that made people unable to look away, and the smell of sand was also washed away by the smell of the dust that had become dense. Advertisement. Hayden looked at the exquisite castle that was still intact before he entered, and it was already in ruins, but there was no idea in his heart. He didn't know how many times he demolished and moved when he came to this world. However, Teacher Zepha should still be there, and Hayden didn't worry too much. He personally tried the general level physical ability, and the general's strength is more than just talking. He thought that even if the entire castle was directly pressed on Teacher Zepha, it would be nothing to Teacher Zepha. Then after Hayden and the others waited for a while, the sand and dust rising from the castle collapsed gradually dissipated, and the scene of the castle becoming ruins was revealed at this moment. Hayden suddenly noticed a figure in each of them. It was teacher Zepha standing on the top of the large ruins, and there seemed to be a person on his broad shoulders. Little ghosts. Zepha yelled at Hayden and the others. At this moment, except for some parts of his clothes, his whole body was slightly damaged, and his body was dusty. Zepha didn't have any serious problems on his body, even his physical strength was not consumed much. Zepha looked at the direction where Hayden and the others were standing and then shouted, "Come here quickly in handcuffs." Hearing teacher Zepha's instructions, Hayden and the others ran over and stood next to teacher Zepha on the ruins within a few steps. Hayden approached and saw that the person on teacher Zepha's shoulder was the ladyboy King Evakov. Her appearance was a bit bad. Her clothes were damaged, and there were blood stains everywhere, and it was obviously her own blood. Hayden couldn't help taking a closer look at the situation of teacher Shah Zepha. There were no obvious wounds on his body, as if the rhythm of breathing hadn't changed much, it was the same as usual. The general is Niucha. He watched Evakov's tragic end again and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. While Hayden was in a daze, the others had already put Halu stone handcuffs on the unconscious Evakov, and two of them were carrying Evakov's shoulder. The size of 4 meters is really difficult for the 10 of them, the tallest of whom is more than 2 meters, so they had 2 people to carry Evakov, and just dragged away on their shoulders. Advertisement. However, at this time, in a moment, it was just an ordinary peachy island at night. The calm sky at night was broken by an indescribable gust of wind, and the cloudless sky suddenly surging up with billowing dark clouds, thick and frightening, and the remaining light was also hidden. The weather on the Great Route is really bad. One of them couldn't help but looked up to the sky. "Yeah, I'm going to get wet again," the other complained afterwards. The weather conditions on the Great Sea Route are weird and changeable. The sky may be clear in the last second, and the next second there will be hail the size of an egg. They have long been accustomed to this kind of change, and they ranted casually. The gust of wind caused Hayden to squeeze the hat on his head and look up at the sky. A drop of rain just fell on his face, but he suddenly felt a bad feeling in his heart. The weather conditions also made Zepha look up to the sky. From years of experience on great routes, he couldn't help but feel that there seemed to be some weirdness in this change, and then he frowned and meditated. Feeling something wrong, Zepha then motioned to them. "The mission is complete. Go back to the warship." Although he is not afraid of the feeling that this weirdness will bring to him, there are all kinds of weird things on the Great Route, and personal experience tells him that everything must be safe. Immediately after, the rain fell more and more intense, and instantly the light rain turned into a torrential rain. Everyone had already used their moon steps at this time, walking low above the forest trees. Chapter 46 *********, Thunder and Lightning. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Strong wind, heavy rain, thunder, lightning. The thunder and lightning are always accompanied by the violent storm. Hayden and the others shuttled through the canopy of the forest trees at high speed. At this time, they had already crossed most of the peach-colored island, and they were not far away from the shore where their warships were anchored. The thunder in his ears and the lightning flashing in front of his eyes intensified the inexplicable bad feeling in Hayden's heart. Everyone's body was already wet by the pouring rain, and the clothes and skin on their bodies were closely attached to each other. No one would like this feeling. In a short period of time, Hayden and others have crossed the entire peach-colored island and arrived in the open space on the coast where the warship was moored. Boom! Suddenly, a shocking lightning bolt struck the open space where their group was advancing in the heavy rain, forcing everyone to stop their progress and stop on the open ground. The position where Hayden slammed the brakes was only 2 or 3 meters away from the location where the lightning struck. The power from nature prevented him from touching it. The brightness of the lightning burst seemed to blind his eyes, and he blinked hard. It took 2 glances to see the situation clearly. When he opened his eyes, he saw that teacher Zepha had already stood in front of him. Long. Zepha said this word in a low voice. Advertisement. Hayden didn't react at all, and quickly looked at the left and right sides, only to find that the faces of other people, including Bedwell, appeared surprised. Suddenly a stranger appeared in front of their group and stood there. And the unknown person in front of this seemed to follow the lightning just now. Suddenly everyone couldn't help but feel a little surprised. Hayden, who was standing behind Zepha, moved a step to the right, his eyes turned to the front, and a guy in a dark green cloak stood in front of them. His facial features were hidden in the shadow of the cloak next. I can't see who the person is. Suddenly, Hayden remembered the word Zepha had just said in his mind. Long. Monkey D. Dragon. When Hayden was stunned, the stranger in front of him spoke. Teacher Zepha. Long time no see. The hoarse voice seemed to convey memories. Long time no see, dragon. Zepha slowly replied with gloomy cheeks. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Teacher Zepha. I don't want to fight you, I just need to take the person in your hand. Huh, is this the first thing you see me after I rebel against the Navy? At this time, a gust of wind blew just to bring up the cloak of the stranger, revealing his face. With a fierce expression, red tattoos on his left face and black hair combed back. This man is the leader of the Revolutionary Army, the most murderous criminal in the world from now on, and the son of a naval hero Monk D. Long. I rely on. Advertisement. Hayden didn't expect that he actually came. Where did his mother come from? Although the original depiction of this character is just a few short strokes, judging from all the signs, the dragon's strength is unfathomable. When the strength of the two sides is similar, in the battle of this level of strength of the general, with the strength of Hayden and the 10 people added together, it seems that one more than one does not seem to have any effect. Having reached the level of the general's level of strength, dealing with the current Hayden and their little fish and shrimps is simply easy. Hey, Teacher Zepha, I have my own reasons, I just need to take away the person in your hand. Long answered Dao Zepha's question. I don't want to do it with you. Ha ha. Zepha couldn't help but chuckle twice when he heard Longwee's words, and then said, Boy, don't you forget how I beat you before. Zepha naturally wouldn't let the dragon take away the object he ordered to be imprisoned in this way, and then moved his shoulders to prepare for battle. Just as Teacher Zepha can almost say that he brought out half of the Navy, Monk D. Dragon of the former Navy is naturally one of them. Long heard the words of Teacher Zepha evoked his memories, but those were all things from the past. Seeing that he couldn't simply take Evakov away, Long could only attack his former teacher. The expressionless face flashed with a trace of indifference, and a violent breath suddenly appeared in his mind. In an instant, that violent aura was released from the inside to the outside, with the dragon himself as the center point, and the invisible aura radiated. Suddenly, the invisible overlord looked like a huge wave, hit Hayden and the others. Boom, boom, boom. In the blink of an eye, the people who couldn't bear the pressure of this overlord color were solved, only Hayden and Bedwell were still struggling to support them. Within a few seconds, Bedwell also rolled his eyes and passed out. Before Zepha could react, he saw that only one of the 10 people he led was Hayden, who could barely stand, but the expression on his face was also uncomfortable. Advertisement. At this moment, Hayden was suffering from the most painful sensation he had experienced so far. It seems that there are countless pointed needles piercing the brain at the same time. The feeling of scalp numbness, and some inexplicable thoughts, tell him to give up like this, give up sleeping. The torrential rain hit him, and the strong sense of pressure made him clench his teeth, and there was a cold sweat on his forehead or rain mixed together. His feet trembled and seemed to be limp in the next second. Hayden bit his tongue, blood rolled in his mouth, and a fishy smell came. But the pain at the same time also made him awake a little, and then forcibly inserted sleeve Shirayuki into the ground to prevent his body from falling to the ground. I won't fall down, he roared as if it could bring him some strength. Zepha stared at Hayden, and he was quite surprised in his heart that this kid was able to hold on for so long under a mature domineering look. Although it was only a few minutes. And Long, the owner of this overlord look, stared at Hayden behind Teacher Zepha, and had the same thoughts in his heart as Teacher Zepha at this moment. This Navy kid can hold his domineering. Immediately inside the dragon arose the idea of wanting to continue to see how long this little devil could support, and then strengthen the power of the overlord. A feeling stronger than the aura just now pressed on Hayden's body. He was caught off guard. Hayden's body became unstable. He half kneeled on the ground. The grass during the rainstorm was muddy and his clothes were splashed with mud. The only thing that supported Hayden from falling to the ground was the white snow on his sleeve at this moment. Gradually, his vague consciousness sank into endless darkness. At the same time, Zepha and Long saw mist rising from Hayden's body, as if the rain dripping on him had been vaporized. Chapter 47 Tianchungbing. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Boom. 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 Amidst the thunder and thunder, violent storms and rain, there seemed to be a strange sound that overwhelmed the roar of these rare storms. The torrential rain hitting Hayden's body at this moment was like a galaxy pouring on him, but the rain could only stay on him for less than a second, and was instantly destroyed by some incomprehensible force. A white gas came out of Hayden, who was half kneeling, slowly lingering around him, just like white ribbons. At this moment, Zepha and Long also understood where the strange sound that suddenly rang was coming from. Dekong was roaring. Hayden was also roaring. With a low-headed Hayden, Zepha and Long couldn't see his specific situation at this time, and Hayden's consciousness at this time was completely pulled into the abyss by something. But Hayden was still not completely overwhelmed by the domineering dominance that weighed on him at this moment, and his body's instincts were still resisting. A moment later, Hayden's eyes closed because he lost consciousness, but suddenly opened. The godless eyes suddenly changed. From the edge of the white of his eyes, it was as if pure black ink was poured in instantly, and the color of the abyss immediately occupied his eyes. The whites of his eyes turned black, and even the pupils like black jewels were mixed in, and Hayden's eyes were taken over by pure black. The white gas emitted from Hayden's body became more and more dense, and even the white snow in his sleeves was also infected, unknowingly automatically unlocking the limitations of the original solution. Advertisement. In a flash, the ice spread along Hayden's right hand holding Shu Baishui to his right shoulder, neck, right face, and then his hair. The black hair that was fluttering backwards under the hat was dyed silver in an instant, just like the color of the top layer that had not been contaminated by the accumulation of winter sunset snow. The thicker white gas all over his body also formed a pure white column around the half-kneeling Hayden. The rising spiritual pressure materialized on Hayden's body, and Hayden was in it. Long noticed the current situation of the Navy imp. He immediately stopped releasing the domineering, and withdrew the pressure on Hayden. This kid feels very strange to him. Long subconsciously looked at teacher Zepha, and Zepha also happened to look at the dragon in front of him. The two looked at each other, and their feelings were a little unclear. Zepha then looked back in Hayden's direction. He had never seen Hayden before, and he didn't understand what happened to Hayden in his body. However, there is one thing in the hearts of Zepha and Long now. The little devil, Hayden, feels like he can hurt them now. I wanted to see how long the students brought out by teacher Zepha could sustain under his aura. Long Jihui didn't know whether the decision just now was good or bad. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi, but at this time, Hayden lowered his head and looked at the ground. He slowly stood up. His right hand was always holding Shirayuki's sleeve, and his left hand looked a little awkward and flew out the navy hat on top of his head, and through the eye mask at the same time, revealing his hair that changed color just now. After that, the spiritual pressure that had turned into a cylinder gradually returned to his body. The violent wind blowing from all directions immediately blew his silver hair around, but Hayden, who seemed to regain consciousness, did not care. Zepha and Long stared at Hayden's face. His eyes were hidden behind his hair, and he couldn't see his specific eyes for the time being. Hayden was like a crab at this time, with his legs wide open and his hands spread out the same way. He then raised his left hand and stroked the messy silver hair back, revealing his forehead and his eyes. In the eyes of Zepha and Long, Hayden's eyes suddenly became unlike those of humans, and the pupils staring at him seemed to be sucked in by the black. Advertisement. I'm finally out. Ha 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 ha. Hayden suddenly uttered words that did not match his usual tone. His expression on his face was excited, and he exaggeratedly opened his mouth and laughed loudly. Immediately, Zepha felt something wrong with Hayden's appearance, frowning and asked, "Hayden." In his excitement, Hayden suddenly heard someone calling him, "Huh." He tilted his head and looked at the source of the sound. It turned out to be his teacher. Wait a minute. He continued. Oh, Hayden couldn't help scratching the back of his head with the soaking feeling of his clothes, with an expression of no one else. The feeling of heavy rain made him feel very uncomfortable. Every day in it, he was lonely in the rain from the ceiling. Since he came out, he didn't want to be rained again. Hayden's movements, expressions, and words at this moment are completely different from the previous one. This made Zepha very puzzled, and the dragon naturally did the same. Although he did not understand the true situation of the Navy, he speculated that his situation was also very abnormal. Long looked at teacher Zepha again, and found that the expression on his face revealed the meaning, and he also didn't understand what his students were like. Hayden, who stood up, ignored the two people in front of him for the time being, raising his sleeve baishui high with his right hand, and the pure white blade after hajime was pointed directly at the roaring dark sky. Boom! Hayden's spiritual pressure at this moment was all poured on the tip of Shu Baishui's knife, and a terrifying aura burst out from the tip of the knife, forming a slender icicle straight into the sky. What? At this moment, both Zepha and Long were a bit surprised by the aura erupting from the Hayden knife. They couldn't help but follow the icicles and looked up to the sky. After a while, advertisement. I saw that the icicle passed all the way to the black clouds that shone with light from time to time. Suddenly, the wind stopped, the rain stopped, thunder died, the electricity went out. The big storm previously created by the dragon was frozen by Hayden's move. The soaring icicles exploded immediately when they reached the sky, and the chill that was stronger than the previous gust speed spread all over the sky within one breath. The peach-colored island returned to its earlier tranquil atmosphere, and then slowly fell from the sky, numerous ice crystals shining in the dark, covering the entire area of the peach-colored island. After seeing that the rainstorm in the sky had stopped, Hayden nodded and said to himself, "Well, perfect." After speaking, he looked at the two standing in front of him. Quote. The ability to change the sky. Both Zepha and Long, who looked up at the sky, watched the sky coming from the storm under the might of nature and were killed by an underage kid. Suddenly there was a brief dull expression on the faces of the two of them. They didn't know what to say, but they were fleeting afterwards. Okay, it's time to count what you did to me just now. Although it was you who made me come out, I don't think I like that very much, well, so you know. Hayden ignored Zepha, who was standing next to him. He raised the tip of the white snow knife in his sleeve and pointed at the dragon in front of him and said a lot. Although because of shared memories, he knew who the two in front of him were. One was his teacher and the other was the leader of the Revolutionary Army, Long. However, compared with his previous strength, the strength he possessed at this moment is not on the same level as before. Even if you are Monkey D. Dragon, I Hayden still want to fight with you. I won't die if I didn't die. Chapter 48 1/vs Dragon Scale. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. After the violent storm went out, the peach-colored island seemed a little unusually quiet. The ice crystals falling from the sky continued, and the temperature in this piece of heaven and earth was slowly dropping. The entire huge peach-colored island seems to have no more living creatures except for Hayden, Zepha, and Dragon, who are standing on the open space on the coast at this moment. Quietly, it seems that Hayden's sleeve white snow knife exudes the voice of the chill can be heard clearly. Even on the naval warships parked on the coast, no one came to check the situation despite such a big movement on the coast not far from their location.
On the clearing where the three of Hayden and the others were standing, more than a dozen people passed out. There were 9 students who had passed Hayden, Pele, and Evikov, who was handcuffed and unconscious. The object of people's competition. But the uninvited dragon wanted to take her away, while Hayden just wanted to fight the dragon, regardless of whether you took the Ladyboy King. Hayden. Zepha wanted to drink Hayden at this time, even though he didn't know how to release that level of moves just now. It was obvious that he was no longer the original him at this moment. Hayden waved his hand to Zepha casually and said, teacher. His black eyes made people unable to see what he was thinking at the moment. Realizing that the Navy recruit in front of him actually wanted to fight him, Long couldn't help but chuckle twice, and a discordant smile appeared on his ferocious face. Boy, there were 2 tricks just now. Long pulled up the torn cloak, but don't think you can beat me. He simply said the fact, nothing more. Hey. Hayden couldn't help but laugh contemptuously when he heard the meaning of the dragon in front of him. Holding Shu Baishui's right hand with a wave, Jianfeng instantly froze the ground on Hayden's right, and a tall slanting ice rose. Huh! When it was said that it was too late, it was still fast, and Hayden used a flash step without warning. It disappeared in front of the dragon's sight in an instant, and then appeared behind him again. Advertisement. Boom. With a cry, Hayden's tight sleeves, Baishui immediately cut off the dragon's right arm in front of him. The burst of chill blasted the dragon's right arm, and his entire body was frozen in an instant. The aura from the collision between the two parties suddenly resembled Mars hitting the Earth, and the invisible shock wave immediately erupted from the point where the two attacked and touched, and the muddy ground after the rainstorm was smoothed by the invisible airwave. This kid. At this moment, Long was a bit shocked by the speed Hayden had just shown, but he didn't allow him to think about it. The moment Hayden flashed behind him, he wrapped his armed right arm and shook hard and bounced off Hayden. The blade of the knife then shook the ice cube on his arm. The chill passed from his arm caused Long to move his lower right arm uncontrollably. However, in the next second of the dragon's domineering perception, Hayden moved to the top of his head. The frosty sky is falling. Between the lightning and flint, the bounced Hayden had flashed to the top of the dragon's head, and Shu Baishui's blade was aimed at the top of the dragon's head. Call. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. The feeling of cutting something as expected did not appear in Hayden's mind. Hayden's sleeve Baishui cut into the air, severely hacked into the ground, and cut out a trench, all covered by ice. The dragon's movement speed was much faster than that of Hayden now. He had already changed places when he had noticed Hayden's position. The momentum of the collision between Hayden and the dragon made Zepha feel bad, and he urgently picked up a dozen people who had fainted on the ground, and folded them on his shoulders, all of which were taken by him to a warship not far away. However, the situation after boarding the warship made Zepha even more angry. All the people on the warship fell on the deck and lost consciousness. I think this situation was also caused by the dragon. Immediately afterwards, the movement of Hayden and the dragon on the coast became more and more fierce, and Zepha on the warship could feel a shock coming, and the chill that broke out on the coast also subconsciously felt a little surprised. Boom. 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 In a short period of time, Hayden has faced the dragon with hundreds of moves. Advertisement. At this moment, Hayden, who was in midair, directly slashed towards the position of the dragon, and the giant flying slash took shape in an instant, mixed with cold air. The dragon blocked Hayden's slash with his arms covered with armed colors, and the remaining slash flew towards a large forest behind him. Click. The moment the slash touched the tree trunk, the entire row of trees in the forest was cut open. The upper half of the big tree bounced under the action of the slash, and then immediately fell. The forest made a rustling sound of leaves rubbing. The ice that was born out of the weather of this season has spread all over most of the places where the two of them fought, and the traces of Hayden's slashing were also everywhere. Hayden, who had been emotionally fluctuating, was quite annoyed because he couldn't attack for a long time, and his mood became irritable. At this moment, his opponent looked like he had not cut a wound except for some damage to his clothes. The armor covered by the domineering armed color, Hayden's slashes could not be cut. At this moment, his silver hair looked a little messy after strenuous exercise, blocking his eyes and blocking his vision. After one move, Hayden immediately retreated and distanced himself from the dragon, standing still and did not continue to attack. The easy dragon saw that the Navy imp was not ready to attack. He couldn't help thinking in his mind, his physical strength was exhausted, still thinking of any countermeasures? Long didn't take advantage of the momentum, but stood still waiting for Hayden. Hayden, whose aura was a little disturbed, said to the dragon in front of him after a while, "I'm going to be serious next." Long didn't say anything. His eyes were fixed on Hayden in front of him, and he was prepared to wait for the kid to release the trick just now. Hayden, who was holding the knife in one hand, stood on the spot, and then slowly relaxed. The right hand holding the knife placed the sleeve Shiryuki on the center line of his body, and then his left hand slowly grasped the handle of the knife. Hayden changed from one-handed swinging to two-handed holding. Long Deng on the opposite side felt the Navy kid on the opposite side at this moment, and his whole aura actually rose again. Advertisement. Immediately after Hayden held the sleeve with both hands, Baishui slowly raised, and the blade went over the top of his head. One cut. Suddenly slashed out an exhausted slash, as if it had slashed out a pure white sky that exuded chills. Suddenly cut open anything between Hayden as the point and extending to the dragon. The ground, the air, the clouds in the sky, dragon scales. Hayden's slashing speed is so fast that the dragon has no time to react and dodge, and can only use defensive tricks, which can harden his whole body with armed domineering. This huge momentum was naturally noticed by Zepha on the warship, and quickly flashed to the place where Hayden and the dragon were fighting at this moment. The aftermath of the slash also gradually dissipated. The one who stayed on the court was Hayden, who was exhausted, using his sleeve baishui as a cane to support it so hard that he would not fall to the ground. With his arms in front of his chest, his feet were forced to retreat and plunge into the mud to draw a long trace of the dragon. An unfathomable incision appeared on both arms, and the blood had flowed along the arms to the ground. However, Long's consciousness was still sober at this time. Except for the wound on his arm, there was nothing serious about the rest. He watched that teacher Zepha had come, and the current situation did not allow him to stay any longer. After using the fruit ability, he quickly changed to the warship and took Evakov away, and then went on non-stop, on the other side of the island, on the shore where his own boat stopped. Zepha watched the dragon's departure and didn't want to pursue it, and quickly went to Hayden's side to check his situation at this time. Hayden fell into a coma again. Chapter 49. The dust settled. It seemed to be similar. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The vast ocean of 10,000 miles is extremely calm today, and it is intoxicating under the mild sunshine. Such a beautiful scenery with calm waves and sparkling scenery really makes people forget that under the mirror-like ocean, there is a sea king that can swallow an entire huge warship. It was already the third day after the end of the Peach Island mission. The patrol warships led by Zepha, including Hayden, are on their way back to the Navy headquarters. I thought it was a simple mission, but as a result, only Zepha, who was a general, was still awake after the end, and the rest fell into a coma. Fortunately, there were no casualties, and Zepha could only comfort him. Fortunately, it was the dragon guy. If you run into other cruel real pirates. Zepha did not dare to imagine a situation where the entire ship except him had been killed. As of today, all crew members except Hayden have woken up, leaving Hayden alone in the ward of the ship's infirmary. At this time, a newsbird happened to fly over their warship, and a navy stepped up into the air to pay for the newspaper. The time of this meeting also happened to be the most boring time of the voyage. Everyone gathered around and looked at the newspaper that had just arrived. At this time, Hayden, who was still awake, suddenly felt movement. As soon as he opened his eyes, he felt the tingling sensation in his brain. He couldn't help groaning and rubbing his temples. Then he forced himself to slowly open his eyes. What you can see is the pale ceiling, and the smell of hospital is permeated in the air suddenly felt by the nose. Advertisement. Why am I fainting again? What did I do before? Hayden suddenly felt that this situation seemed to be similar. Then he slowly sat upright and leaned back against the bed with both hands. The tingling sensation in his brain gradually disappeared, and his consciousness returned to a normal state. This will make him look at the environment he is in now. There was a needle in his left hand, and the nutrient was hanging high up into his body along the long infusion tube. There was a small sink in the corner of the room. Well, it should be a ward on a warship. With a normal mind, Hayden immediately determined where he was at this time, but how did I get into a coma again? Hayden couldn't help but frowned and began to remember. I remember that the last second was a stormy day. We were still on the Shemale Island, carrying the Shemale King against the storm and hurried back to the warship. Then suddenly a bolt of lightning struck the path of travel, and with the lightning came another person.
I rely on. Hayden, who had hollowed out his brain, remembered what happened when he thought of this. Monkey D. Long wanted to take away his cadre, the Monster King. Teacher Zepha naturally refused to let him. Then Long started his hand. He seemed to stun all 10 of us who went to the island directly with the Overlord color, as if I was just hold on for a while and faint. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Damn it. Hayden thought of this, and felt that the process of remembering this time should be what actually happened before, and suddenly he felt ashamed of countless seniors who passed through. In the years since he came to this world, He has also seen many things, such as the battle between Teacher Zepha and the strong, armed color domineering, seeing and hearing color domineering, fruit ability, and so on. Although what he saw was only the tip of the iceberg in this world, he didn't expect that the result of his first experience of the domineering look of the Overlord would be like this. When he hadn't seen it before, Hayden was still thinking in his mind, what if he came across an opponent with a domineering look in the future, if he used the domineering look to suppress me? At that time, under the deterrence of the opponent's domineering, will he inspire his own domineering look? What else will happen? Advertisement. At the age of 8, he stood like the king of the world. Hayden thought very well in his heart. MMP. Hayden murmured. With his face pulled up on his pants, he pulled out the infusion needle in his left hand and got off the bed. Then he turned out the usual uniform and the belt that hung the sleeve baishui from the small cabinet beside the bed. After putting it on, he pinned the sleeve baishui beside the bed to his waist and walked out. After leaving the ward door, Hayden has long been accustomed to the warm sea scenery in front of him, and anyone who looks at it every day will not find it strange. Hayden, who was walking in the aisle, wanted to find Teacher Zepha, and asked him how everyone was unconscious afterwards. Although he woke up on the warship now and said that there should be no major problems afterwards, he has no way of knowing the specific situation after losing consciousness. He does not know what happened afterwards. There may be nothing, or major things may have happened. The scene where Teacher Zepha and Monkey D. Dragon battled, Hayden had specific concepts just thinking about it in his mind. He has seen Zepha blasting a mountain as if he was playing, and his opponent was a dragon imaginable from the comics. The aftermath of the two people's fight must be quite dynamic, but the Shemale Island is now what's the situation? There were too many questions that popped up in Hayden's mind for a moment, and with the expression of already pulling his pants, his face at this meeting was very ugly. Hey, look here, we actually got the newspaper. Yup. Show me, show me. A loud noise rang from the deck below, attracting Hayden's attention. He couldn't help stopping, turning to the railing to look at the deck below. What I saw was the companions of the hunting group who were together, and several familiar voices sounded inside. What they talked about was filtered into a few keywords in Hayden's ears. We, the newspaper, the new Navy. Advertisement. At the same time, I also noticed that most of the people who went to the island with him were below. Since they all survived, it seems that there is no big problem with what happened afterwards. Suddenly, Hayden's attention was attracted by what they were talking about below, and he jumped over the railing to the deck below. Boom. The sound of heavy objects falling to the ground interrupted the gathering crowd, and immediately turned around and looked over. Hayden. You are awake. Come here and take a look, where is you written on it? Hayden, who appeared in the eyes of everyone, immediately made them excited, all rushing together and shouting, hurriedly greeted Hayden over. Okay. Hayden didn't understand what they were talking about, but he knew it when he saw it for himself, and he walked over, and then everyone gave him away. Walking to the center, what I saw was Bedwell holding a large stack of newspapers. Here. Bedelvin flipped to the newspaper section in advance and handed it to Hayden. Yeah. The puzzled Hayden took the newspaper silently. He has read a lot of newspapers in recent years. They are all useless information. In recent years, the sea has been extremely calm. Hayden thought secretly in his heart, and subconsciously turned around to look around his companions. However, the expressions on their faces have a weird feeling, they won't speak anymore. Hayden, whose doubts deepened, then looked down at the newspaper in his hand, and the big headline on this page made him even more uncertain. The world's #1 swordsman in the future. vs. the mysterious man in a cloak. Hayden slowly hit 3 question marks. Chapter 50 Pond Ripples. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The world's #1 swordsman in the future confronts mysterious men wearing dark green cloaks. Here is a report from our newspaper special reporter Hyuanli on XX, 1507, the exclusive news of our special reporter on the Peach Color Island, Peach Color Paradise, where the kingdom of Kamabaka on the Great Route is located. A picture of Admiral Zepha leading a small team through the pink forest on Peach Island. JPG. FK me. He spread his hands on the newspaper and was surprised to see Hayden here. This F. King, Where did we shoot this from? Could this perspective be taken from the sky? Hayden looked at the angle presented in the photo and thought to himself. He eagerly continued to read the report in the newspaper. Recently, Zepha, the admiral and chief instructor of the Naval Academy, led a team to Peach Paradise, which is the kingdom of the monsters, to perform special tasks. Guor Agency speculated that it was probably because of the recent behavior of the Queen of the Monster Kingdom that led to the dispatch of the Navy. So far, we have not received any specific information. However, after the Navy came to the island, he was first led to the Queen's castle by a party from the Kamabaka Kingdom. In the real-time record of more than 10 minutes hidden inside the castle by our reporter, General Zepha led his men to see the Queen of the Kingdom of Kamabaka Ambrio Evakov. It's all nonsense. Hayden muttered to himself, but what he thought in his heart was that this reporter followed them all the way. The students surrounding Hayden didn't speak, and looked at the newspaper in Hayden's hand with bated breath. Then another photo was attached to the newspaper. A picture of Admiral Zepha slightly looking up at the Ladyboy Queen on the high steps. Behind him stands Hayden, a group of people with disabilities under 2 meters tall. JPG. After only a few minutes of conversation, the two sides talked about it, and the Ladyboy Queen took the initiative, and then there was a roar of fighting between the two sides. The fierce fighting situation on the front line made our reporters dare not take close-up shots. They could only escape from the castle with difficulty after the beginning of the battle. The last 10 minutes passed. In the fierce battle between the two sides, the Queen's castle was already all collapsed and turned into rubble. A castle wreck.jpg. Advertisement. Then standing on the ruins of the castle, only Admiral Zepha and a team of his men were left. Ambrio Evakov, the Queen of the Kingdom of Kamabaka, the King of Shemales, and the Man of Miracles, was in a state of unconsciousness and was carried by the General Zepha. However, the events of this trip did not end here, and the next thing was the real highlight. Just as the Navy was about to return to the warship it was on, the last second was a quiet and peaceful night, the next second it became a violent wind, followed by lightning and thunderstorms, as if the bad weather on all kinds of great routes was here. It all poured onto this island in an instant, unlike any storm that suddenly came to Peach Paradise. However, our reporters have been conscientiously recording what happened next. Just when the Navy men and horses brought the Monster King back to their warships. Boom! A bolt of lightning struck in front of them, and it was the mysterious man in the dark green cloak that followed the lightning, blocking the Navy's path. While our reporter was cautiously hiding aside and observing the situation on the court at this time, the two sides briefly talked a few words, and then the development of the matter took a turn for the worse. More than a dozen subordinates led by General Zepha seemed to be suddenly stunned by something invisible, and only one naval swordsman was left with his slender and beautiful saber to support the ground without falling to the ground. Immediately afterwards, the General Zepha and the mysterious man started an invisible eye attack, and the situation on the field suddenly stalemate at this moment. Our reporter was almost unable to bear the suffocation at this moment. In a daze, the ordinary Navy soldier suddenly changed. In the storm, in the thunder and lightning, the Navy, which looked like a boat tumbling with the waves in a huge wave, suddenly changed his body. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Suddenly there was an aura that only appeared on the big people above the sea. Reminiscences of our special reporter after he was sober. Our special reporter at this time could no longer bear the oppression brought to it by this world. The next thing they told was based on the images saved by the phone worm. A strange gas rose from the Navy body, and a large swath of pure white suddenly appeared from his right hand holding the knife, as if the color did not exist in this world. Then around his whole body, a terrifying icicle immediately rose. The Navy took off his hat, exposed his hair, and revealed his eyes that were not white at the moment. A picture of Hayden after dyeing his hair. JPG. Quote ? Advertisement. Aren't you fainted by the overlord color at this time? The situation reported in the newspaper and what Hayden recalled did not seem to match, and Hayden, who was staring at the newspaper at this moment, was a little confused. And what are my styles? Looking at his style in the newspaper, the question mark suddenly filled his face. Hayden's companion next to him looked at the newspaper in Hayden's heart and wanted to know what happened next. Immediately after that, The seaman raised the sword in his hand to the sky, and a thin white line shot straight into the sky from the tip of his knife. Then something happened that everyone hadn't expected. This seaman in a normal Navy uniform. He actually froze the sky in the midst of a storm, and changed the celestial phenomenon of this sky with the power of a single knife. A picture of Hayden raised to the sky after waking up, a picture of .jpg after the storm was extinguished. Quote. X 123,456,789 plus Hayden. Looking at the photo attached to the newspaper, none of the people who surrounded him, including Hayden, knew what was written in the newspaper. This is Hayden. Is Hayden's ability so terrifying? Did Hayden hide it before? Is Hayden so scary? Am I so good? Call out, call out, call out. One by one questions suddenly popped up in their minds. Immediately, the quiet crowd started to noisy, and asked Hayden all the time. Advertisement. Hayden really couldn't bear their noise, and the curiosity aroused by the newspaper reports about his affairs almost overflowed his body at this moment. He quickly called them to stop. Stop. Then Hayden continued to look down at the newspaper in his hand. Next, the image saved by the phone worm was shot with a white light flashing, and the image was over. As for what happened to the Navy and the mysterious man who blocked the road, our intelligence has not yet obtained specific information. However, after the incident, we rushed to Peach Paradise Island as soon as possible and rushed ahead of the others after we took a few images. The general situation of the island remains. A.jpg of the entire forest after being cut horizontally, with traces of ice crystals remaining on the cut. A picture of the terrain changes caused by the battle between the Navy and the mysterious man. JPG, the ground everywhere is full of traces cut by terrorist slashes. A piece of ground is cut out of a terrifying crack. JPG, as if a bottomless canyon appeared out of thin air on the island. We rushed to the scene and lay on the edge of the crack, as if we could hear the darkness, the sound of sea water hitting the rock wall from below. From the images recorded by our side, after we rushed to the island to observe the situation, we made a bold conjecture. The one-sword strength sea soldier led by General Zepha is probably a sword tyrant secretly trained by the Navy. According to the horror rift, it is speculated that the Navy may even be in the realm of a great sword tyrant. Inferring from his slightly youthful face, the Marine soldier's age is probably still a minor. Just think about it, this unknown Marine soldier, a great swordsman of this age. The future of this son is truly terrifying. However, our agency has not yet learned the specific intelligence of this Navy. We are rushing to collect everything about this Navy. If you want to get more information about this Navy, please pay attention to our next package of reports. In the end, our agency gave this Navy a name: Quangbing. When did I become a great swordsman?